Buckle up for the ride of your life as we bring together some of your favorite 80s TV series. Fasten your seatbelt for at least 28 minutes of high-octane adventure documentaries, one right after the other in succession. We've edited this together so tightly that you won't even notice the difference in production values as we advance through the timeline. So buckle up, buckleheads. All your favorite is here, like Knight Rider. So fasten your seatbelt, it's definitely going to be good enough, and starting right now. A superhero ahead of his time, pushing the boundaries of technology both in its production and the stories it told. One of the most expensive television shows created by one of the most successful television producers in history, who I promise you will receive no special treatment from me. Cutting-edge special effects, action, humor, fighting, dancing, a glow-in-the-dark Lamborghini, canceled after one season of ratings that today would make it the most popular show on television. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Automan. Automan was a live-action television series that ran for one season of 13 episodes from December of 1983 to April of 1984. Walter Nebeker is a computer programmer who craves action while working for a police department that relegates him to an office full of blinking lights and dot matrix printers to try to put his nerd skills to use. In a classic "I'll show you who's a nerd" move, Walter writes a program that incorporates some of the greatest crime-fighting and popular culture personalities of the day. His execution is so perfect that it literally comes to life like an altruistic digital serpentor. My man solves the equation of artificial life and intelligence, creating a computer-generated holographic crime-fighting superhero that can leave the digital world. It has super strength, can phase through objects, dance like John Travolta, and curse like John McEnroe with 2 gigs of memory total to spite his boss. Automan, the world's first automatic man, is a hologram come to life. He has all kinds of superpowers that manifest themselves as the plot demands, kind of like Golden Age comics, where if the hero can think it, he can do it. No predicament is too complicated that a writer can't figure out a new power to get him out of it. That said, most of the episodes feature Automan using his accessory Cursor to draw various vehicles and weapons to use in his war on crime. Cursor is the Tinkerbell to Automan's Peter Pan, another artificial intelligence Walter just incidentally created on what has to be the most productive day of employment ever. The most frequently utilized piece of cursor-generated technology is the auto car. If you understand the naming convention of the Batmobile, then I don't think I have to explain this to you. Like Batman, Automan had a whole digital garage of vehicles, including a helicopter, a motorcycle, a jet, and Cursor even made a tank at one point. Walter Nebeker and Automan are part dynamic duo, part ego and alter ego, part man and Iron Man. They frequently team up to fight crime side by side, but at the same time, Walter created Automan to be everything he isn't. Tall, strong, charming, and one of the handsomest men on TV. But when the mission called for it, Walter could also wear Automan like a digital supersuit, not unlike Tony Stark with his Iron Man armor, allowing Walter to truly live out his dream of being a superhero. Automan was created by Glenn A. Larson, a name you might recognize from the laundry list of other pop culture series that bared his name. The $6 Million Man, Battlestar Galactica, Buck Rogers, Quincy, Manimal, The Fall Guy, Magnum P.I., Knight Rider, and lots of others, including reboots of a few of those properties. Glenn A. Larson is, however, unrelated to actress Brie Larson, cartoonist Gary Larson, or Hi, I'm Dan Larson. Glenn was a prolific creator, writer, director, composer, producer, but he was also accused of being an idea stealer. Star Trek writer Harlan Ellison referred to him as Glenn Larceny, which it just doesn't sound that funny to me. I don't get it. The TV Western Alias Smith & Jones, which ran from 1971 to 1973, people said was a knockoff version of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, the 1969 movie starring Paul Newman and Robert Redford. 1979's BJ and the Bear was a little too close to 1978's Every Which Way But Loose. Magnum P.I. was influenced by Hawaiian Eye. Larson was sued by Fox over Battlestar Galactica, which they thought was basically just another Star Wars.
He's a great cop. His partner's virtually the same, only better. 1 million gigabytes of law enforcement with all the right bits. and hardware to match. A computer-generated policeman who's not always PC, while others surf the net.
Automan. This is it. I warned you. Warned him, not me.
He nets the crooks.
Automan, Tuesdays at 6:30 on Bravo.
You don't have to be Thomas Magnum to notice the similarities between Automan and Disney's Tron, released a year before in 1982. The visual effects and the premise of the character's creation are, at first glance, like Simon and Simon. But in Glenn's defense, he owned that, literally. Glenn says he decided to create Automan after Donald Kushner and Peter Locke came to him about developing a project using the type of visuals seen in Tron. Kushner and Locke had their own production company called the Kushner-Locke Company, founded just after Kushner finished producing his first live-action film, which, oh by the way, was Tron. Automan wasn't just going to be inspired by Tron, it was essentially going to be, unofficially, its spiritual successor. Glenn Larson liked the visual style of Tron, but wanted to make something that was even more accessible and took place in our world. Automan flips the premise of Tron. In Tron, Kevin Flynn goes into the digital world as a user fighting against the evils of Sark and his minions. Automan is a digital character that comes into the real world to fight against our criminals and corruption. Many of the visual effects pioneered by Kushner and the team on Tron were either refined for Automan or accomplished using alternate methods that were faster and easier to produce based on their experience with Tron. There were new materials, new camera processes, lots of steps that could be eliminated from the process to make it faster and more affordable. Many of Automan's cursor-generated vehicles and objects were even more simply created by the use of reflective tape lining the real physical objects and then just shooting them in the right lighting conditions, like in the dark, to make them appear as wireframe constructs. The Autocar was a real live Lamborghini Countach that belonged to Glenn Larson. Automan was played by Chuck Wagner, an actor trained for musical comedy theater. He could dance, he could sing, and the writers took advantage of those skills to make him a true Renaissance man of a superhero. After Automan, Chuck would go on to star in multiple Broadway productions. Heck, I personally saw him back in the 90s as both Jekyll and Hyde in Jekyll and Hyde and Beast in Beauty and the Beast. Walter Nebeker was played by Desi Arnaz Jr., son of Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball. Roxanne Caldwell, Walter's friend, co-worker, and the only other character on the show that knew what Automan really was played by Heather McNair. Classic character actor Robert Lansing was Lieutenant Jack Curtis, and also classic character actor Gerald S. O'Loughlin played Captain of Detectives E.G. Boyd. If that cast, composed of 60% tie and jacket wearing policemen, gets you excited for a line of action figures to support the show, then have I got some good news and some bad news for you. The good news is that Automan was licensed by a toy company called Akamis Toys to create a line of action figures based on the characters from the show. The first wave of roughly 5.5-inch figures was intended to have Automan, Walter, Lieutenant Curtis, and Captain Boyd. The bad news is that, to date, only Automan has ever been found either loose or carded. Akamis Toys was based out of the UK, and that's where the majority of the very limited number of action figures have been found. That said, a little more good news, the 5-inch Autocar, the Autocopter watch, and the Automan Halloween costume pictured on the back of the blister card are all real and can be yours with some patience and cash. CBS Toys released an Automan slot car racetrack. Aero Toys put out an Automan puzzle. In 1985, Bug Bite Software released an Automan game for the Commodore 64. A company called Jaru released a bunch of novelty toy sets, things like Automan rubber stamps, Automan play money, briefcase set, Automan flashlight, binoculars, cheap low-end stuff that was churned out for lots of different properties with different stickers applied, packed in a show-specific blister card. Despite the creation of 13 episodes, only 12 of them aired before the show was canceled and replaced with Monday Night Baseball for the rest of the summer. 28 years later, in 2012, the entire series was released on DVD by Fabulous Films in the UK. 3 years later, in 2015, Madman Entertainment released it in Australia. That same year, on November 10th, Shout Factory released the series on DVD in the United States. Later that night, every episode was available on multiple Automan fan YouTube channels, although most have since been removed. As of this video, Automan is not currently available on any major streaming service. What gets a show like Automan canceled? Well, it was an incredibly expensive show to produce at the time, costing $1 million an episode, but ultimately it all comes down to eyeballs on screens. Automan's Nielsen rating for the year it aired was a 13.6, but back in 1984 that was not good enough. Acknowledging that the landscape for television viewership has changed, the standards are different today in 2020. The highest rated show of the 2019 season was Sunday Night Football, pulling a 5.9. Does it mean that Automan would be a hit today if it were airing now? I mean, we'll never know unless we try, right? Automan was part of a unique era in television brought to life by one of the most successful television producers of all time. He found a way to build on previously successful ideas, calling it market research, and it worked until it didn't. Automan wasn't the biggest TV sensation, but it helped make the 80s into the 80s that we know it as today, with some of the most unique and ridiculously fun television concepts that have ever existed. Thank you to 80stees.com for sponsoring this video. Click the link in the description below and use code TOYGALAXY to get 30% off your order today. I'm currently in my 6th decade on planet Earth. The 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the aughts, the teens, and now the 20s. And while a lot has changed, there's at least one thing that hasn't: my taste in clothing. It's t-shirts all the way back. Lucky for people like me, you know, people with torsos, 80stees.com is also t-shirts all the way back. T-shirts for any occasion you might need a t-shirt for, which, again, for me, is all occasions. Going to the movies, a concert, a ball game, a TED Talk, visiting family, getting groceries, walking the dog, dentist appointment, wedding, optometrist, colonoscopy. Find the shirt that's right for you. And while you're there shopping for yourself, maybe you find something for someone else too. Your mom, your dad, your veterinarian. They've got shirts for teachers, artists, writers, and all your favorite YouTube editors. You can buy the shirt that I'm wearing in the video you're about to watch, not the actual shirt, but one just like it. Click the link below and use code TOYGALAXY for 30% off your order today. Again, that's code TOYGALAXY for 30% off your order. And thanks again to 80stees.com. A secret government special weapons development program finds its test pilot and a daredevil police officer injured in the crossfire of a drug smuggling operation that leads back to the top of the very police department he was working for. In a world of corruption and motorcycles on both sides of the law, who will ride the center line dispensing justice for all? Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Street Hawk. Street Hawk was a 13-episode live-action television series that originally ran on ABC in the United States from January to May of 1985, and later on networks in 42 countries around the world. Jesse Mach loves two things: action and being a cop. But sometimes those two things are incompatible. When an Evel Knievel-style motorcycle stunt results in a 2-week suspension for both Jesse and his partner, they turn to racing to fill the void. During one particular race against each other through the desert, they stumble upon a drug smuggling operation that lands Jesse in the hospital with extensive injuries and his partner murdered. But it's not all bad news. Jesse's motorcycle stunt show that got him suspended in the first place was witnessed by Norman Tuttle, the main research engineer for the Street Hawk program. Despite his reservations about Jesse's mental and physical fitness, he signs him to the program with a promise of rehabilitation, action, and federally backed vigilante justice. By day, Jesse will still be Jesse Mach, mild-mannered police officer reassigned to the Public Relations Division using a cane, walking with a limp. But by night and day when necessary, he is the mysterious black-clad pilot of an experimental prototype all-terrain pursuit vehicle. He is, the bike is, the program is, they are, codename Street Hawk. And now it's time for a game of Is It Knight Rider? Round 1, a brutally injured cop recruited for a top-secret vehicle-based vigilante law enforcement weapons program. The question is it Knight Rider? No, Michael Knight and Jesse Mach were both cops rebuilt by their respective vigilante law enforcement teams, but Knight Rider gets a whole new face and identity. Street Hawk gets his knee repaired and keeps his day job as a cop. Could not be more different. Round 2, Knight Rider's kit and Street Hawk's Street Hawk are basically just the same thing, except one's a car and the other's a motorcycle. Is it Knight Rider? No, it's not. Kit is an actual artificial intelligence with its own identity. Michael and Kit are like teammates, partners who can function independent of each other. Street Hawk is a highly advanced prototype vehicle that's operated by a rider. By itself, Street Hawk, the bike, can't do anything without Street Hawk, the pilot. Final round, they're both pursuing justice wherever that path takes them, with or without the help of law enforcement, and sometimes against law enforcement. They're both vigilantes. Is it Knight Rider? No. See, Knight Rider is a public law enforcement operation backed by a mysterious billionaire. There's only one Kit, And one Michael Knight. Street Hawk is a federally funded weapons development program that, if successful, will be rolled out to every police department around the country. They could not be more different. All right, that's it for this edition of Is It Knight Rider? Be sure to join us next time for Is It Airwolf? Street Hawk was created by Paul M. Bellows, Robert Walterstorff, and Bruce Lansbury as a Limekiln and Templar production in association with Universal Television. While it feels like it could have been a Glenn A. Larson production, it was not. Bruce Lansbury in particular had a deep television background, having worked on the 1960s series Wild Wild West and then Mission Impossible after that, Wonder Woman, The Fantastic Journey, and even contributions to The Brady Bunch, Happy Days, The Odd Couple, and not for nothing, in the 90s he would end up producing Murder, She Wrote, starring his sister, Angela Lansbury. Originally intended to be called Falconer, the production team had to stay flexible. Turns out there was already a pilot in the works with that title. But what's in a name? That which we call a hawk by any other name would ride just as street. But then Street Hawk was too close to Nighthawk, and that landed them a $250 million lawsuit from Honda. Honda wanted to protect the brand value of their Nighthawk motorcycle and only agreed to drop the lawsuit after the show was canceled. Street Hawk was originally intended to premiere on primetime Monday nights at 8 p.m. at the end of 1984 as opposed to the beginning of 1985, but ABC accidentally found themselves with a surprise performer in the drama Call to Glory starring Craig T. Nelson about a U.S. Air Force pilot and his family, meaning that Street Hawk became a mid-season replacement Friday nights at 9 p.m. instead. Street Hawk, the motorcycle itself in show, is an all-terrain attack motorcycle designed to fight urban crime, capable of incredible speeds up to 300 miles an hour and immense firepower. In show, it cost $3 million. In reality, as with any stunt-driven show, lots of individual motorcycles were built for the purpose that they would be used in the show. Bikes with better suspensions for jumps, bikes that were more about the details and lights for appearances during the close-up camera work. Multiple bikes needed to be on hand so the production could continue while other bikes were being repaired. The crew kept 6 different bikes on hand at all times.
여기마다 흥미진진한 검은 독수리. 꿈과 용기를 심는 검은 독수리 스턴트. 한국 로보콤.
Jesse Mach was played by Rex Smith. Rex began his acting career on Broadway in the cast of Grease in 1978. He was a teen heartthrob featured regularly in magazines like Tiger Beat and 16 Magazine. His career was on a musical path, including a top 10 song in 1979 called You Take My Breath Away. Norman Tuttle, Street Hawk's designer and engineer, Jesse's co-pilot, navigator, and all-around Alfred back at the control center, was played by Joe Rigobuto. You might recognize him from his later role as Frank Fontana on the television show Murphy Brown. Lieutenant Commander Alto Belli was played by Richard Venture, and Rachel Adams was played by Jeannie Wilson. Rex wasn't the first choice for Jesse Mach. Don Johnson was originally considered, but he landed Miami Vice. George Clooney screen tested, and creator Robert Walterstorff liked him, but ABC said no. However, Clooney does appear in the second episode. 12 years later, Clooney would get another chance at a superhero without any superpowers, which was still 8 years after Rex was the first person to portray Marvel's Daredevil in the TV movie The Trial of the Incredible Hulk. Superheroes love 2 things, action and selling toys. While there were plans by Kenner to release Street Hawk-related toys in the US, almost none of them were produced. A Street Hawk command center with motorcycle launching action was in development. It would have been compatible with 3 different bikes, Street Hawk, Stunt Bike, and Police Cycle, each with a removable figure with construction similar to Star Wars. A Street Hawk friction-powered cycle was produced by Kenner and most likely distributed by Palitoy in the UK, where the piece is more commonly found. LJN produced a Street Hawk motorcycle with lights and motorized action as part of their Rough Riders line. In Brazil, Street Hawk was retitled Moto Laser. Glassleet, based out of Brazil, released a motorcycle and a Chevy truck similar to the one that ran over Jesse Mach in the pilot episode.
Not cool, Zeus. Not cool.
There was a racing track with Street Hawk and a stunt bike and a Jesse Matt individually carded action figure whose blister card back features all the members of the A-Team and Michael Knight. Erdl produced and may or may not have released in some quantity a voice-activated role-play helmet set. MPC released a model kit of Jesse's yellow 1969 Ford Mustang. Empire Model Kits in Japan released a Street Hawk kit. Rainbow Toys produced two different versions of their Street Hawk motorcycle, one with and one without helmet-shaped launcher, but the true gem of Street Hawk toys was the one with ties to G.I. Joe, released in India and the UK by Fun School. Fun School was a manufacturer founded in India in 1987. They produced licensed merchandise from companies like Hasbro and Disney. When it comes to G.I. Joe, they are known for quirky repaints, parts swapping, and repackaging. Access to the G.I. Joe molds allowed them to produce a G.I. Joe Ram motorcycle in black with metallic silver decals and call it Street Hawk. The blister card is even branded as G.I. Joe, likely to tie it into the debut of the line and its popularity in India at the time. For the initial release, Fun School repainted an original Snake Eyes figure with silver accents as a stand-in for Jesse Mock. Successive releases in India and limited other international markets would see Snake Eyes replaced with a Target figure, again with silver accents, a much more accurate representation of the helmet and costume on the show. A third version had the Target head on a spearhead body, again with silver accents, a glorious attempt that not only does its best to provide fans of the show with an official version of the thing that they watched on TV at almost no additional cost to Fun School, but also an exciting new variant for G.I. Joe collectors around the world. Lunchboxes, binoculars, puzzles, activity books, there was quite a bit of merchandise released, including a video game by Ocean Software for the ZX Spectrum. The pilot episode was adapted into a novel by Target Books in Britain, as were 3 pairs of episodes for a total of 4 books. And if you don't want to read with your eyes, there were Street Hawk books on tape. Speaking of tapes, the pilot episode was released on VHS in Canada and the US by MCA. Strangely enough, the 2 edits are different both in terms of runtime and visual effects. The Canadian version has red lasers, where the US version has blue lasers. In 2010, Shout Factory, for the 25th anniversary, released the complete series on DVD. The set included a new documentary called The Making of a Legend and an unaired pilot with different Street Hawk weapon effects. And you can purchase the entire series in standard definition via Amazon.com. Street Hawk didn't have the same impact that its contemporaries did. Forever compared to Knight Rider, it gets lost in the haze of other primetime superheroes, detectives, private investigators, vigilantes, and soldiers of fortune. It did have a longer life outside the US. And thanks to this infernal internet that simultaneously brings fandoms together while it rips the rest of the world apart, the fan base has grown since it left the broadcast airwaves, to the point where in 2010, Rex Smith himself was actively lobbying to bring the series back in a legacy capacity, similar to Knight Rider's return to television in 2008. Street Hawk got decent ratings, but ultimately 'twas scheduling that killed the Hawk. Opposite Dallas on Friday nights was a tough ask for television viewers, especially the demographics they would have needed to pull to keep the advertising money coming in. Street Hawk, as a technical stunt and effects-driven show, was also very expensive. The kind of show that a studio won't give a second season unless they really, really believe in it. Given the choice between Knight Rider and Street Hawk, viewers chose to stick with the talking car they knew over the motorcycle they just met. Look up in the sky, it's a bird! It's a panther, or maybe some kind of horse, or a bear? It appears to be a crime-fighting professor who has mastered the mystic art of shape-shifting by unlocking the secrets of evolution between species. Yep, that's what that is. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Manimal. Manimal was an 8-episode live-action television series that aired from September to December of 1983. It represents the point at which American television viewers drew a line in the sand for creator Glenn A. Larson refusing to follow him any further into the realm of the absurd. Manimal is the story of Dr. Jonathan Chase, who, as a boy, traveled around the world with his ever-curious missionary father. On one such occasion, they found themselves deep in the uncolonized areas of the African continent. His father managed to stumble into the competitive and dangerous world of ancient magics, rituals, and other spooky plot devices necessary to legitimize the wafer-thin plausibility of the show's core premise. See, just before he was murdered by rival mystic artisans, Jonathan's father did 2 things. 1, he turned into a hawk instead of straight up dying as a human, and 2, he presumably transferred his legacy to Jonathan, that legacy consisting of his compassion and his ability to turn into animals at will. Jonathan spent years studying and mastering the art of human-animal or man-animal transformation, seeing the world through an anamorphic lens, breaking down the barriers between understood sciences like biology, chemistry, physics, zoology, ornithology, herpetology, paleontology, horsestry, bearology, pantheronomy. You know where you go to learn pantheronomy? Pantherona you. Jonathan Chase can change into any animal, any size, any shape, any order, any phylum, absolutely thumbing his nose at concepts like conservation of mass, maximum animals, or minimum animals. Where the Hulk or Wolfman would tear through their clothes during transformation, Jonathan Chase just has clothes. Or he doesn't. Such is the nature of the ancient and mystic art of anamorphization. Jonathan decides to use his shape-shifting powers for good as a crime-fighting partner of the police department. He's ready to help whenever the crime veers toward animal control's jurisdiction or when the circumstances require the delicate touch of a panther, the careful persuasion of a rattlesnake, the eagle eyes of a hawk.
This is for the drill, right?
Yes.
But I'm actually gonna kill these birds for real.
Jonathan Chase isn't alone in his fight against crime. His buddy Ty Earl and Detective Brooke McKenzie also know his secret. They help him unleash his vigilantism where it is most effective, cleaning up any mess he leaves behind, asking him if he is a good boy, and then reassuring him that he is. The Manimal purists are going to be pissed at that one. Did you just imply that he shits when he's a panther? The early 80s were a transformative time, if not for actual societal issues, which there were, then for the types of entertainment that were being consumed, which they were. The Incredible Hulk aired from 1978 to 1982, and American Werewolf in London hit theaters in 1981. Michael Jackson's Thriller video turned music videos and MTV into legitimate media in 1983. Creator, writer, producer Glenn Larson was never one to shy away from capitalizing on a trend. Glenn says the idea for Manimal came from co-creator Donald Boyle. NBC was looking for shows. Donald Boyle had an idea. NBC sent Donald to Glenn. Don pitched it like this, probably. He's a mammal, he's an animal, he's a mammal animal. Glenn said, let's do it. Glenn A. Larson was a proven hitmaker on television in 1983. His portfolio already included McCloud, Quincy, Battlestar Galactica, Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, BJ and the Bear, Knight Rider, The Fall Guy, Magnum P.I. Heck, Automan and Masquerade were both shooting at the same time as Manimal. As a science fiction crime drama, a substantial part of the show's initial budget went toward creating the visual effects that would not only be integral to telling the story, but also enticing viewers to watch, just for stark, in-your-face graphic horror of the transformations. Academy Award-winning visual effects artist Stan Winston created the initial scenes of man to panther and man to hawk. Considering the complexity of the models and the budget invested in them for the pilot, those two sequences became staples of Jonathan Chase's crime-fighting toolbox. Nearly all of the other morphs would be handled off-screen, the horrible details left to your imagination. Stan, of course, would build on his Manimal experience and ultimately win 4 Academy Awards on films like Terminator, Aliens, Predator, Edward Scissorhands, Jurassic Park, and Iron Man. Dr. Jonathan Chase, the guy never actually referred to as Manimal, was played by Simon McCorkindale, full name Simon Charles Penderid McCorkindale, the Benedict Cumberbatch of his day, if only for name absurdity. Simon would, ironically, go on to a regular role in a show called Falcon Crest, and lots of other stuff that doesn't fit the framework of that joke. He was in Nightwolf in 2010. Detective Brooke McKenzie was played by Melody Anderson, who you might know as Dale Arden from the 1980 movie Flash Gordon. Ty Earl was originally played by Glyn Turnen in the Manimal pilot, but Michael Roberts would take on the role for the rest of the series. The 7 regular series episodes all opened with a quick recap for anyone that might have missed the pilot episode, narrated by William Conrad. Dr. Jonathan Chase, wealthy, young, handsome, a man with the brightest of futures, a man with the darkest of pasts. From Africa's deepest recesses to the rarefied peaks of Tibet, heir to his father's legacy and the world's darkest mysteries. Jonathan Chase, master of the secrets that divide man from animal, animal from man, Manimal.
A warning to the people of Dallas.
Bobby, looks like we got Friday night wrapped up this year.
Just when you thought it was safe to go back into television. Manimal is coming. Manimal is coming.
Bobby, Llewellyn, Mama, somebody help! Help!
Manimal, Fridays this fall on NBC. Not your usual rubber ducky.
How do you make toys from a show like Manimal? Is it just one of those canisters filled with plastic animals? If you're Dan Larson, you make a panther, an eagle, and a snake out of construction paper, but that's just one brilliant example and hard for 20th Century Fox to make any money. In 1984, Fleetwood Toys stepped up to release officially licensed non-posable figures for Manimal. See, most toy companies looked at the problem and saw only two solutions: figures of Jonathan Chase, mild-mannered, suit-wearing, handsome professor, or panther, hawk, snake, bear, horse. But Fleetwood Toys saw a third option, a hybrid option. It was right there in the title all along. 3 action figures representing the halfway point for Jonathan Chase on his way to or from whatever animal the mission called for. 1, a cobra with human arms. 2, a panther with human arms, foot, and some face parts. And 3, I honestly don't know what the third one is. If you have a better picture, please internet, my nightmares aren't horrible enough. In some cases, Manimal was more popular internationally than it was in the US. While there were no comics or dedicated publications released in the US, in the UK, a Manimal annual was released in 1984 with exclusive stories, comics, and games based on the show. Well, there was one comic published by Renegade Press in 1986 called Manimal. It's a collection of stories written and illustrated by longtime prolific comic writer-artist Ernie Colon, stories that he wrote and illustrated throughout the 70s. This Manimal is a man with animalistic tendencies, beast-like powers. It's more of a Jekyll and Hyde or Wolfman type thing. He's seeking revenge on the Nazi commandant who murdered his family. It is not canon. Don't even bother queuing up the graphic. Manimal only lasted 8 episodes, including the 90-minute pilot. In the pantheon of Glenn A. Larson-produced classic 70s and 80s television shows, its impact, its legacy was minimal. There is no one reason that Manimal failed to finish a single season. A far-fetched concept, lack of marquee star power, and oversaturation of police drama, both fi and sci-fi. But producer-creator Glenn Larson will tell you that it was scheduling more than anything else. The pilot, the thing that would have hooked the viewers, that would have established the character, was scheduled opposite one of the most popular television shows of all time. You might think that the only people interested in an anamorphing professor cop were watching, regardless of whatever was on any other channel at the time, and you might be right, but we'll never know for sure. 2 weeks later, the 1-hour regular episodes began airing. 4 weeks after that, Manimal was essentially canceled, with the remaining 3 episodes being aired a full month later. And then it was officially canceled.
Yes, the show about a man who fights crime by transforming himself into different animals has been temporarily removed from the NBC lineup and placed into that TV netherworld known as hiatus. Now its fate is in question, and join us, won't you, as we remember the past and look to the future of Manimal, Show at the Crossroads.
But was that the end of Manimal? Never count out a Glenn Larson concept, especially when Glenn Larson is making the calls. In 1997, Glenn Larson created and produced a show called Nightman based on the comic book character originally created by Steve Englehart and Rick Hoberg for the Ultraverse imprint of Malibu Comics, now owned by Marvel. Nightman, for the TV show, is a saxophonist struck by weird lightning, granting him the power of hearing evil thoughts in exchange for the inability to ever sleep again. Also, he has an anti-gravity belt that allows him to fly and a bulletproof suit with an enhanced goggle lens that shoots lasers. That's not really the important part. The important part is that somehow that show got a second season, and in the 6th episode of that second season, titled Manimal, Dr. Jonathan Chase, Manimal, has learned the secrets of time travel and is squaring off against Jack the Ripper in Victorian England. Glenn A. Larson crosses your line in the sand. Glenn A. Larson will never go too far into the realm of the absurd. The more absurd Glenn A. Larson gets, the stronger Glenn A. Larson becomes. Dr. Chase follows Jack the Ripper back to the 1990s, where we find out the whole thing is just an attempt to set up a backdoor pilot for a new Manimal show featuring Dr. Jonathan Chase's daughter, who has inherited his legacy of animality. Nightman ran for a total of 44 episodes, but even his strength wasn't enough to get Manimal back to his or her own show. Simon McCorkindale stayed busy, perhaps too busy, as he turned down the role of Captain Jonathan Archer on Star Trek Enterprise. Glenn Larson never gave up on Manimal or any of his concepts, characters, repeatedly rebooting, reimagining, and reintroducing them over the years, always with an eye toward bringing McCorkindale back. In 2006, McCorkindale was diagnosed with cancer. In 2009, he announced that the disease was terminal, and just a year later, he passed. In September of 2012, The Hollywood Reporter announced that Sony Pictures Animation had acquired the rights to a live-action/CG reboot of Manimal, with Glenn Larson attached as a producer. In 2014, Deadline reported that Jimmy Miller, Will Ferrell, and Adam McKay were also on board as producers, and a script was being written by Jay Martell and Ian Roberts of Key & Peele. This was not going to be a serious drama. That said, later in 2014, Glenn Larson died of cancer as well, and the project has sat dormant ever since. When Googled, results are now related to a lifestyle brand offshoot of weightlifting straps that were created in 2010 and a French death metal band who went quiet in 2012. In 2012, Manimal the Complete Series was released on DVD in the UK by Fabulous Films and in France by Condor Entertainment. 3 years later, Shout Factory finally brought the entire series home to the US. Manimal is what it is. 8 episodes about a guy who transforms into animals and uses that power to fight crime. It is not high art. It was number 15 on TV Guide's worst TV shows of all time in 2002. In 2004, a British publication called Broadcast ranked Manimal at number 5 on their list of worst US TV exports. The Ultimate Encyclopedia of Fantasy delivered the epitaph, quote, "Axed after 7 regular episodes, the only surprise is that it ever got past the pilot stage," end quote. But don't blame Glenn Larson if you go in expecting anything other than what he promised you in the past. Televised science fiction storytelling that pushes the boundaries of what might make for interesting television. A crime-fighting action hero who could live his life blissfully unaware, consumed by luxury, but instead he chooses to fight crime as a panther, a hawk, a horse, a bear, a snake, a manimal. A group of exceptional humans brought together by their uncanny superpowers, paranormal investigators protecting the innocent, fighting for justice, saving the world. Extraordinary people facing incredible odds, relying on themselves as a team, risking their lives for a world that can't understand them, a world that fears them. Is this the X-Men? Are they the Avengers? Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Misfits of Science. Misfits of Science is a 16-episode live-action television series originally broadcast on NBC in the United States from October of 1985 to May of 1986. Also called, Superminds in France, Die Spezialisten Unterwegs in Germany, Curto Circuito in Brazil, and Los Científicos Rebeldes throughout Mexico and several other countries. Dr. Billy Hayes is part of the human investigation team at Humanidyne Institute. His facility is a safe haven for unusual people from around the world. People with abilities or powers that some can and many cannot control. In this world, a lot of what we think of as supernatural is real. And for this team, routine to the point of mundanity. The human investigation team is a defense of those people from the world that would exploit them. In Billy's own words, quote, "protecting weird people from the warmongers," end quote. Their parent organization, Humanidyne, on the other hand, is the largest defense contractor in the United States. And recently, a new department head was put in place that changes the team's focus from humanitarian research to commercial interest. The new boss wants the human investigation team to start producing results that can be sold to the military or vacate the premises. Humanidyne's big project is the neutron laser, a weapon so powerful it could potentially destroy an entire building, an entire island, an entire country, and, in every computer simulation they've run so far, the entire planet. They still have some bugs to work out. But it gets worse. The beloved old boss of Humanidyne accidentally finds out that the new boss already built the neutron laser in cooperation with the military. The old boss is taken into custody by the new boss to be used in experiments to keep him quiet. Along with a new patient, a man who can freeze anything he touches. And on top of that, the new head of Humanidyne terminates the entire human investigation team's budget. With nothing left to lose, Billy recruits a team of superpowered weirdos for a jailbreak/heist to free their friends and expose the neutron laser's existence to the world. The Misfits of Science, so named thanks to the t-shirts Billy had made up for a rec league basketball team that he was never able to assemble, include Billy's friend Dr. Elvin Lincoln, L for short, pun intended. Elvin is a very tall man and a very talented scientist. At 7'4", much to Billy's dismay, El's dream was not to play basketball, but to just be normal. Elvin conducted glandular research to develop a formula to make himself smaller, and it worked. Too well, in fact. Now, when he applies pressure to the back of his head, it activates a neurological reflex that causes him to shrink down to 11 inches for around 14 minutes, no more than once an hour. Much smaller than his target height of like 6'1". Johnny Bukowski, or Johnny B, is a former musician and certified 80s cool dude who was electrocuted during his last performance. As a result, he's become a living battery, absorbing electricity from everything around him, including static in the air. He can store a charge and fire it off in lightning bolts from his hands or briefly run as fast as the Flash. Unfortunately, water burns his skin, so the dry isolation of the desert has become home for his own safety and the people around him. Gloria is a teenager with sight-based telekinetic powers. As long as she can see something, she can move it with her mind. She's a juvenile delinquent, having been in trouble more than once for using her powers in an undisciplined manner. She's also dealing with the fact that her mother was committed to a mental health institution for insisting that Gloria's father is from outer space. The only thing keeping Gloria in check is her probation officer / friend, Jane Miller. The team's transportation of choice, their Batmobile if you will, is an ice cream truck with a freezer large enough to carry Arnold Beef Neater after the jailbreak. Beef is the man who was cryogenically frozen in 1937 and now, today, can freeze anything he touches. But if his temperature ever reaches 32 degrees Fahrenheit, he will die. The last member of the team is Dr. Billy Hayes, of course. Like Jane, Billy has no superpowers other than his quick wit and his genuine compassion for the extraordinary people he meets through his scientific endeavors, despite his emphasis on labeling people as either weird or normal. He does have a pretty good jump shot, and it does come in handy, but it's not more important than his maturation into a true selfless leader, finding his purpose through the extraordinary circumstances that brought him to this moment, to leading this band of outcasts to a greater good.
That's me, Dr. Billy Hayes, and I'm looking for a few good heroes who know how to have a good time.
Excuse me, would you happen to be seeking representation?
Like my friend Elvin. Now, he's a brilliant scientist, but boy, can he get down. From 7 feet to 7 inches, and he can go where no man has gone before. Then there's Beef. Now, he doesn't make a very good first impression, but this dude is so cool that he can freeze everything he touches. Now, Gloria is really just a sweet kid, but she can do anything she puts her mind to.
Hold it!
She's got powers that'll make your head spin. And then there's Johnny B. Now, he used to be a rock and roll star, but now he attracts electricity. Oh, he's got more juice in him than O.J. Simpson. And when he cuts loose, he'll just blow you away.
Together, these misfits of science will make an unbeatable team. And with Billy at the wheel, they're out to save the world and have a blast. The Misfits of Science, Fridays this fall.
Misfits of Science was created by James D. Perriott, who would go on to produce shows like Grey's Anatomy, Ugly Betty, and Sons of Anarchy. Prior to Misfits, he had worked on The Bionic Woman, The Incredible Hulk, and Voyagers, so he had a pedigree for sci-fi superhero-type shows. But that concerned him. He didn't want to be that guy who can only do that kind of show. When head of NBC, Brandon Tartikoff, came to him wanting to do this show about a team of people with extraordinary abilities, he initially balked. Look, when the head of NBC comes to you and asks you to do a show, even if you have reservations, you say yes. And that's what James did. Just go for it. A little bit tongue-in-cheek. Even if it flops, they can still say they gave it a shot and had fun with it. The name Misfits of Science and the bigger picture stuff were proposed by Tartikoff. He suggested they could pull crazy ideas from places like the National Enquirer. Tonally, it could echo Ghostbusters, which was a hit in theaters the year before. Fun, wacky, superhero-y, science fiction type Friday night fun. That's how it's pronounced. Tartikoff was young and successful. He started at ABC in 1976. A year later, he was at NBC handling comedy programming. By 1981, he was in charge of all programming at NBC. All of this by age 32. NBC had been lagging behind ABC and CBS. Things were getting dire. If NBC didn't start making some changes, gaining some ground, there might not be a network. Johnny Carson was considering leaving. Saturday Night Live was tanking. Syndicated shows were looking for a home anywhere else. While intimidating, it was also a freeing time, allowing Tartikoff to take risks that wouldn't have been possible if things were stable. They had nothing left to lose. Shows that began under Tartikoff include The Cosby Show, Seinfeld, Cheers, Golden Girls, Family Ties, Miami Vice, and Knight Rider, of which Tartikoff said was inspired by an absence of leading men with acting ability. He thought a talking car could do just as well as those overly permed talking meat sacks. My description, not his. Tartikoff steered NBC back from the abyss, from 3 shows in the top 20 in 1981 to the #1 network in 1985. Part of Hollywood's success is borrowing a formula that already worked for someone else. Looking for something to put on Friday nights against CBS's unstoppable force Dallas, Tartikoff took cues from 1984 box office hit Ghostbusters. Heck, half that cast came from NBC's Saturday Night Live in the first place. The Misfits of Science pilot episode opens with 2 blue-collar city workers exploring a spooky storage facility in the dark where they uncover a tomb-like cryogenic chamber. The whole thing is played exactly the way you'd expect it to play if it were intended to be part of the Ghostbusters universe. When that scene ends, the episode cuts to the theme music playing over an ambulance driving down the highway. It is the exact same kind of car that the Ghostbusters use as Ecto-1, explained by the fact that, like the Ghostbusters, the human investigation team is wildly underfunded and forced to use broken and out-of-date technology. Misfits of Science featured an interesting cast. Billy Hayes was played by Dean Paul Martin, the son of Dean Martin. Elvin Lincoln was played by Kevin Peter Hall, who appeared in the infamous 1982 made-for-TV movie Mazes and Monsters, and would go on to play the Predator in the Predator movies and Harry in the Harry and the Hendersons movie and TV series. Johnny B was played by Mark Thomas Miller, the 3rd actor in the series to go by 3 names. They shared a total of 7 first names amongst them. Gloria was played by Courtney Cox, who landed the role after her appearance in the 1984 video for Bruce Springsteen's Dancin' in the Dark. She has stayed busy since. Jane Miller was played by Jennifer Holmes, who had a prolific career prior to Misfits, but was pregnant early in the series. Her role was reduced as the shooting went along. Beef the Iceman was played by Mickey Jones, the 2nd most successful member of the cast after Courtney Cox, and Alf's adopted dad from Earth, Max Wright, was Dick Stetmeyer, the director of Humanityne Institute during the regular series. Misfits of Science was the kind of show that, if produced today, would have easily supported a line of action figures, licensed apparel, games, posters. There would have been a far more comprehensive rollout for a show like this because there is far more established audience for a show like this. It's no spoiler to say that Misfits of Science was not a success. To be like Ghostbusters was not enough. Characters and plotlines were at times ridiculous, and the consequences weren't always considered. In the pilot episode, the team drives an ice cream truck because the character Beef has to stay frozen or he'll die. But in subsequent episodes, Beef just isn't there anymore, and they still drive the ice cream truck. I don't know. Misfits of Science lasted for an additional 14 episodes after the pilot. A 16th was made but never aired. Like Manimal and other shows before them, they were victims of the dreaded opposite Dallas time slot on Friday nights. All things considered, though, maybe we should thank Dallas for shows like Manimal and Misfits of Science existing at all. You don't take a chance with an idea like Misfits of Science unless you're just throwing stuff against the wall to see what sticks. When you have nothing left to lose, you can take bigger risks. And that is the real story of this show in our world and within the narrative. And not for nothing, but how many TVs were in a single household at the time? 1? Maybe 2? That's a big part of why a show like this fails to find its audience. Not the lack of connection with the larger mainstream audience. That was never going to happen. It's the niche audience that would have loved it while the primary or solitary TV set in the house was otherwise in use. Misfits of Science lasted as long as it did thanks to Brandon Tartikoff. He liked it, even though the ratings weren't there, even though it wasn't the Misfits' fault. Everything NBC tried to put on Friday night against CBS died. The pilot episode for Misfits of Science was released on VHS back when dinosaurs roamed the Earth. The entire series was released on DVD in Germany as a 5-disc set in 2008 with both English and German soundtracks and subtitles. It includes the single final episode that never aired. In 2012, the series was released on DVD in France, but to this day, the series has not been released in the US and is currently not available on any streaming service, although you can find it here on YouTube unofficially. According to writer and story consultant Donald Todd, the problem with a DVD release in the US is the music. Misfits of Science featured a lot of popular music. The pilot episode alone would necessitate acquiring the rights to music from Thomas Dolby, Kim Wilde, Chuck Berry. All right, maybe that's not that expensive, but how many copies of this thing are we gonna move? A Misfits of Science return with the original cast is impossible at this point. Dean Paul Martin was a captain in the California Air National Guard flying fighter jets. He was killed in a crash in 1987 during a snowstorm. Kevin Peter Hall was in a car accident in 1990 that caused injuries so severe he needed surgery. The blood transfusion he received was contaminated, and a year later he died of AIDS. Mark Thomas Miller was also in an accident that pulled him away from acting. He found a new life as a contractor building houses. Despite being on silk stockings in 1996, IMDb lists his last role as Glenn Beckman in a movie called The Enigma with a Stigma in 2006. Courtney Cox is, of course, Courtney Cox, and unlikely to be involved in any kind of reboot or reimagining of the concept. She's got Scream 5 coming up and would have to fall a bit further from stardom before landing at the Human Investigation Team again. Brandon Tartikoff himself died in 1997 at age 48. He had struggled with Hodgkin's lymphoma cancer throughout his life. It makes the things he accomplished all the more remarkable knowing how young he was when he passed. Misfits of Science was nominated for an Emmy in 1986 for Outstanding Sound Editing in a Series, but its legacy isn't about the accolades, real or imagined. It's about the message at the core of the show. On the surface, Misfits of Science is about superpowered adventuring and paranormal investigation, but underneath, it's also about change. Unexplained physical evolution, sure, but more importantly, learning to accept the differences between people. And not just accepting those differences, but understanding that the differences are what make us stronger. It's the differences that make us unique. And that includes Billy accepting himself and his own shortcomings, his own disappointments about who he is and what he does. In Billy's own words, being weird is special. Being weird is okay. The threat of a militarized police state is pervasive in our society, especially in science fiction. The fear of a wolf in sheep's clothing. Absolute power, corrupting absolutely, the machine built to protect you now pointed at you. But seldom is the question asked, what if that wolf was actually a good doggo? Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Airwolf. Airwolf is a live-action American television series that aired on CBS for 55 episodes over 3 seasons from 1984 to 1986, and then another 24 episodes on the USA Network in 1987. It was like Knight Rider, but with a helicopter. Like Street Hawk, but with a helicopter. Like Blue Thunder, but with a different helicopter. Airwolf is a prototype helicopter designed and built for the military. On the outside, it looks like a regular civilian helicopter with a Shamu evocative paint job and a few cosmetic flourishes. But as indicated by the flight crew's insignia, this flying sheep is actually a wolf. That's why they called the show Sheep Wolf. That's why they called the show Bat Sheep. That's why they called the show Fly Wolf. Machine guns hidden in the wings, missile pod hidden under the underside of the fuselage that could fire missiles or rockets or drop bombs, 3D topographical imaging, tactical countermeasures like flares and chaff, radar and radio jamming, resistance to radar detection or stealth, bulletproof body and windows, increased computer-aided flight control system allowing for maneuverability uncharacteristic of a helicopter, jet engines, all that, and turbo boost. Developed by a division of the CIA known as The Firm, Airwolf was a secret project that even the US government didn't know about. It was stolen by its designer, Charles Henry Moffett, during a performance demonstration for a US senator. Charles immediately used Airwolf against his benefactors, destroying the test facility, killing everyone inside, and seriously injuring the head of the program for The Firm, a man named Michael Goldsmith Briggs III, aka Archangel. Stringfellow Hawk is awesome. Michael Goldsmith Briggs III is terrible.
That's all going in.
All right, fine. Moffat makes his way to then-relevant American pop culture punching bag Libya, where Muammar Gaddafi provides him with refuge from American pursuit, dancing girls, swimming pool, food, drink, lodging, and a mostly secure Airwolf parking space. All he has to do is the occasional favor for Gaddafi, like shooting down some French military aircraft or sinking an American Navy ship. Enter Stringfellow Hawk, a man blessed with one of the coolest fictional character names ever conceived. Recluse, cellist, art appreciator, dog dad, Vietnam War veteran, one of the test pilots for the Airwolf program, and harbinger of death. Archangel, on behalf of The Firm, makes Stringfellow an offer that that he does refuse. Stringfellow doesn't want the $1 million reward for recovering Airwolf. He wants information that he knows the US government has about his brother Sinjin, who's been missing in action since he was lost on a mission in Vietnam, a mission that Stringfellow himself was a part of. Stringfellow's entire life has been a trail of the people close to him, the people he cares about most, dying in tragic ways that has left him scarred by the trauma. The only person he lets into his life is his surrogate father, fellow military veteran and helicopter pilot, and his current employer, Dominic Santini. Working with Archangel and the firm, Hawk and Santini execute a plan to recover Airwolf from Gaddafi's compound and return it to American soil. However, Hawk and Santini know that they can't just hand it to the US government. They'll never get the answers they need about Stringfellow's brother. Instead, they rig Airwolf with a self-destruct function that only they can deactivate and hide it in a secret mountain cave that only they know the location of, in exchange for funding, information, and continued pressure on the US government to find out what happened to Stringfellow's brother. They agreed to work with Archangel on missions for the firm. Airwolf was created by Donald P. Belisario after a failed attempt to create a similar show as a spin-off from his very successful series Magnum P.I. Donald was already a veteran television writer, creator, and producer, having worked with television producing icons like Glenn A. Larson and Stephen J. Cannell. Television audiences were ready for a helicopter show in the early 80s. Blue Thunder hit theaters in 1983, serving up the perfect premise for a series. Highly advanced military-style helicopter with turbo boost designed to escalate law enforcement capabilities falls into the wrong hands. You know, the hands of the government that created it. The system is broken and the only one who can fix it is a lone altruistic Vietnam veteran suffering from PTSD working outside the law. He's got to steal it back and mete out true justice. It is a common popular narrative in early 80s fiction. Knight Rider began airing in 1982, setting the standard for the one-of-a-kind futuristic crime-fighting vehicle with support team/family. It was only a matter of time before someone took the two concepts and put them together. In fact, two different productions tried to make Helicopter Knight Rider in 1984. Blue Thunder as an ongoing television series inspired by the movie, and Airwolf. Both shows reset the premise of fear of a militarized police state to it's not the tool that's bad, it's the people using it. Despite ABC getting Blue Thunder on TV before Airwolf and having the support of the feature film and running opposite Riptide, a Magnum P.I. type show that also had a helicopter, Airwolf won the ratings battle. Blue Thunder cleared the airspace after only 11 episodes. Stringfellow Hawk was played by Jan Michael Vincent, who had been working in Hollywood since the 1960s. During its run, he was the highest paid actor on television, making $200,000 per episode. Dominic Santini was played by longtime character actor Ernest Borgnine. Ernest was a man that, for years as a kid, I thought was my uncle thanks to an autographed photo that hung in our living room. It never occurred to me until I was much older how weird it would have been to have an autographed photo of a family member, but this is a good time to remind everyone that kids are dumb.
자부심이 함께 달린다. 월드카 음악. 지칠 줄 모르는 뜨거운 가슴. 정상을 추구하는 강한 의지. 너로 인해 내가 더욱 빛난다. 월드카 음악. 배우 자동차.
Airwolf's theme song was composed by Sylvester LeVay, who also handled the in-episode score for most of seasons 1 and 2. Initially, the score was more orchestral in flavor, but it evolved into a more synthesized sound as the episodes in the totally radical 80s progressed. That job was then handed over to Udi Harpaz. Season 1 develops a narrative over the course of the season. Hawk and Santini have, technically, stolen a very expensive prototype weapon belonging to the US government. The firm, the CIA, the US government are both friend and foe, helping but also pursuing, ready to reclaim Airwolf if possible. But in seasons 2 and 3, CBS wanted to broaden the appeal of the show, lighten things up a bit, make it more appealing to the whole family. More Airwolf doing Airwolf stuff, less espionage and intrigue, more blowing stuff up, and a softer, more diverse cast. Jean Bruce Scott was brought in to play Caitlin O'Shaughnessy, a Texas police helicopter pilot who pursued Hawk and Santini after an incident with a corrupt sheriff and his goons. She would eventually join the Airwolf crew as a flight engineer and sometimes pilot. Even with those changes, Season 3 was the final season for Airwolf at CBS. Ratings were sliding, production cost was as high as ever. Jan Michael Vincent was struggling with alcoholism. Creator and showrunner Belisario left the show, as did his wife Deborah Pratt, who played Archangel's associate Morella. In 1987, Airwolf was picked up by the USA Network with several cosmetic, production, and budgetary changes. With an eye towards syndication, they were looking to produce more episodes with less money. A new, more affordable, more reliable cast was brought in. Stringfellow Hawk appears in one episode to bridge the two networks. Santini is only seen from behind before dying in an explosion. Archangel is reassigned somewhere else. The firm is now the company. Airwolf is now led by St. John Hawk, Stringfellow's long-lost brother. Thanks to some creative writing, it turns out that he wasn't killed in action or rotting in a foreign prison. He was working deep undercover for the US government. The reduced budget meant they no longer had the actual helicopter to shoot new flying sequences. All of those shots would be recycled from the previous 3 seasons. Even with the changes, Airwolf would be canceled after 1 season on USA. During its run on TV, Airwolf spilled into other media. In 1985, 2 books written by Ron Renaud were published by W.H. Allen, Airwolf and Airwolf 2: Trouble from Within. Several scripts were adapted into books as well. There were coloring books and other content focused at kids. A UK magazine called Look In even included Airwolf comics. Airwolf hit the toy aisle as well, to varying degrees depending on the country you lived in. Several model kits were produced, as were die-cast versions of Airwolf itself. Erdl released both 1/48th and 1/64th scale toys. In Brazil, Glassleet released an assortment of figures and vehicles that could almost be defined as a wave. Locally branded as Aguia de Fogo, Glassleet recycled and repainted their Blue Thunder Frank Chaney action figure as Airwolf figures. New decos turned it into Stringfellow Hawk in Airwolf flight suit and casual wear. There was the Airwolf helicopter itself, as well as 2 different Jeeps scaled down so that they weren't compatible with the figures, but still legit Airwolf toys. The figures were released carded as part of the Heroes.tv line, which included figures from TJ Hooker, the A-Team, Street Hawk, and Knight Rider. Multiple companies licensed Airwolf to put on things like stamp sets, sticker books. You could even get an Airwolf wallet. And if I could, I would like to address the Airwolf stamp set, which featured 6 stampable images from Airwolf, only one of which was Airwolf itself. Kids had to find a way to get excited about an Ernest Borgnine stamp. Airwolf computer games and sequels were released by Elite for the Commodore 64 in the UK and for the Amstrad CPC and the ZX Spectrum. There were versions for the BBC Micro and various Atari computer systems that were essentially just adapted from previously released versions of Blue Thunder. Other Airwolf games were exclusive to certain countries. An arcade game was released in Japan. It hit the Nintendo Entertainment System and the Genesis a few years after the series went into syndication, although for the Sega Genesis you may not have recognized it renamed as Crossfire, back to its old flying sheepwolf tricks again. Today, Airwolf can still be found from time to time in syndication. There have been multiple VHS and Laserdisc releases, foreign and domestic, DVD releases, and depending on what country you live in, you may have even been able to catch re-edits released as feature-length motion pictures at your local cinema. Better yet, you can watch the entire series, all 4 seasons, for free after you're done watching this video on NBC's streaming service, Peacock. In 2015, Airwolf kind of returned in a series of comics produced by Lion Forge Comics, distributed by IDW. Lion Forge Comics was new to the scene and attempted to make a solid first impression with a series of licensed nostalgia titles, including Miami Vice, Knight Rider, and Airwolf, among others. Airwolf Airstrikes was a series of loosely connected stories featuring some of the original characters, as well as new characters and a new Airwolf that looked nothing like the original Airwolf. If you like helicopters, you may be interested. If you like Airwolf, you may be disappointed. Ernest Borgnine was 95 when he passed in July of 2012 due to kidney failure. Jan Michael Vincent continued to act and continued to struggle with drug and alcohol addiction. He was 74 when he died in February of 2019 after suffering cardiac arrest. Airwolf itself, the cosmetically modified Bell 222, was sold after the show was canceled. It was used for some time in Germany as an ambulance. However, in 1992, all 3 crew members at the time were killed when they lost their way during a storm and crashed. There is no film, no reboot, no nostalgia-powered return to Libya in the works. Hasbro has not made any announcements about a Transformers crossover figure. The fan community persists, but the future is unknown. Airwolf lives on as part of the pantheon of 1980s action-adventure television heroes, one of several shows featuring a super vehicle crusading for justice outside and sometimes against a cumbersome bureaucracy of law enforcement, empowering vigilantes to do what cannot be done by the corrupt administrations and profit-hungry corporations. It is one of the most iconic television series of all time, developed by a Hall of Fame creator at the height of his abilities. It put a new face on extrajudicial crime fighting, proving that one man can make a difference, and established an easy-to-follow template for every near-future Super Machine television series that would follow. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Knight Rider. Knight Rider is a 90-episode live-action television series that spanned 4 seasons from 1982 to 1986. It tells the story of a well-financed prototype crime-fighting duo whose first mission was to save the very network that had created them. In the very near future of 1982, a company called Knight Industries has established a justice-focused charitable organization called the Foundation for Law and Government. Through this philanthropic endeavor, they have developed a one-of-a-kind crime-fighting force that exists to take on cases that might require more direct action than law enforcement might be capable of, or that law enforcement is simply unwilling to pursue. Knight Industries owner Wilton Knight, a billionaire in the age of millionaires, funds a multitude of medical and scientific research programs, but none is more television-friendly than Knight Rider, a first-of-its-kind crime-fighting duo with a small secret support team. Before his own death, Wilton Knight selects the person who would become the human half of his crime-fighting duo. Michael Long, a Vietnam veteran and decorated police detective, was in the wrong place at the right time, surviving a point-blank attempted execution, saved not only by a metal plate implanted in his head after a combat injury, but by timing, money, and the questionable morality of an eccentric but well-meaning billionaire. The metal plate prevented the bullet from entering Michael Long's brain and killing him, but the redirection of said bullet did require his face to be reconstructed, or let's say rebranded, because as far as the world is concerned, Michael Long died that day. He is reborn as Michael Knight, a man who does not exist. A man with, some would say, an uncanny resemblance to Wilton Knight when he was a younger man. You were on the right track, Wilton, but you just had to go and make it weird. The other half of the Foundation's secret crime-fighting team is the Knight Industries 2000, or KIT. It is a self-aware artificial intelligence with 1,000 megabits of memory wrapped in the most technologically advanced car on the planet. KIT is nearly indestructible and has a constantly upgraded array of gadgets, gizmos, and gimmicks that would make James Bond plots. KIT is bulletproof, can travel at speeds over 200 miles per hour, or jump over stuff using turbo boost. Voice synthesizer, voice projection, anamorphic equalizer that can see across the full spectrum of visible and invisible light, X-ray, super hearing, super smell, touch sensor, silent running, grappling hook, flamethrower, tear gas, flares, radar jammer, ejector seats, money dispenser, homing device, comlink, GPS, a laser, bucket seats, and a whole bunch of other stuff, not to mention television and a mobile phone. KIT seats too comfortably. Michael Knight and KIT are backed by the innovations of Knight Industries and the funding and guidance of the Foundation, which is headed by Devin Miles. Devin is joined by Dr. Bonnie Barstow, who is the chief engineer responsible for dealing with KIT's technical maintenance and Michael's high-maintenance maintenance. Michael, KIT, Devin, and Bonnie travel the country in a mobile command center. It's a black and gold semi-trailer truck emblazoned with the Knight Industries insignia. It has everything Michael and KIT need to recover, recharge, and prepare for their next mission, wherever the fight for justice takes them. Knight Rider was created and produced by Glenn A. Larson, a man on a televised winning streak entering its 3rd decade. Larson had already worked on, written, produced, or created shows like The Fugitive, McCloud, Alias Smith and Jones, The $6 Million Man, Quincy, Battlestar Galactica, Buck Rogers, BJ and the Bear, Magnum PI, and The Fall Guy. Glenn was approached by then-president of Paramount Studios, Richard Lindheim. Lindheim and Larson had worked together previously on shows like BJ and the Bear and The Misadventures of Sheriff Lobo. Lindheim was looking to develop a show about a car. Larson was thinking more Lone Ranger. Larson was technically out of his deal with Universal Studios, headed for Fox, but technically still owed them one more project. Larson was initially flattered that Universal wanted him to take on this project, that Universal thought of him as the guy who could breathe life into something as benign as a car show. The reality is that it had already been turned down by 8 other producers, and Larson was the last guy on the list, but that's not important. What's important is that Larson had a bunch of great ideas that he had collected from other concepts that he was ready to be inspired by for this show. KIT, the high-tech crime-fighting supercar, can trace its inspiration back to an episode of BJ and the Bear titled Kane's Cruiser. In this episode, a police chief with an affinity for the most aggressive means to maintain law and order procures a black, high-tech, state-of-the-art super police car. Lindheim thought that would be a great place to start. Larson thought of KIT as the level-headed Tonto to Michael Knight's impulsive Lone Ranger. But the vision was clear. Michael and KIT riding the dusty plains or roads, roaming the countryside in the name of justice, on a crusade to champion the cause of the innocent, the helpless, the powerless in a world of criminals who operate above the law, if you will. All that was left were the details. How to take that concept and make it new and sexy for Friday night TV in the 1980s. Horses aren't Friday night sexy, but horsepower is. And what is horsepower but another word for star power? Lesson 1, write this down. A car is just a sexy horse with a lot of charisma. I'm giving you this stuff for free. Now take that sexy horse, mash it together with some of the cool stuff that Larson noticed was successful in other movies and TV shows. HAL 9000 was cool in Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey. That's a good place to start from for the self-aware artificial intelligence. Larson gave it some life, a heartbeat, by repurposing the oscillating scanner eye from his own Battlestar Galactica's Cylons. KITT evolved over the production of the pilot episode, originally named TAT, or the Trans Am 2000, since it was a modified 1982 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am, and initially they weren't necessarily trying to hide that association. TATT changes to the Knight 2100, then the Knight 2000 because, after all the alterations to the vehicle, Pontiac didn't want them to call it a Trans Am. The car and the personality in Larson's original concept weren't the same thing. Originally, the car, like Michael himself, was rebuilt from a pre-existing thing, Michael's actual car. The personality of the car was not necessarily restricted to or part of the car. Michael Sheff, a toy designer working for Mattel, was brought in to futurize the 1982 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am. Larson gave him the general concept, and Sheff did the rest, from the curves of the LED-laden dashboard to the minimal amount of visible seam work on the exterior. Larson's only request was that it incorporate the scanner bar in the design. Over the course of the series, KITT would see additional modifications, both cosmetic and narrative. A new dashboard, cleaner lines. Season 3 would see a complete makeover with the addition of a transformation while in Super Pursuit mode designed by George Barris, the guy who designed the 1960s Batmobile and the Munsters coach. KITT was voiced by William Daniels, who was starring on NBC's St. Elsewhere at the same time. To further the illusion of the character that was KITT, Daniels requested that he not be credited.
May I suggest you put the car in the auto-cruise mode for safety's sake?
No, you may not.
KITT's partner in crime fighting is Michael Knight, played by David Hasselhoff. David was picked over Don Johnson, who would go on to star in Miami Vice, but NBC didn't even like the Hoff, to be honest. But Larson had seen everything he needed to see in Hasselhoff's appearance in 1978's Star Crash. Devin Miles, the head of the foundation, was played by Edward Mulhare. Patricia McPherson was KITT's technician, Dr. Bonnie Barstow, for seasons 1, 3, and 4. Rebecca Holden played KITT's technician, April Curtis, during season 2. Richard Basehart played Wilton Knight and provided the voiceover narration during the intro and outro.
Richard Basehart.
Don't patronize me, Joel.
Season 1 introduced Michael and KITT's most important recurring nemesis, the Knight Automated Roving Robot, or CAR. CAR was the prototype vehicle that would eventually lead to the development of KITT. CAR had been put into sleep mode after Wilton Knight found CAR's programming to be dangerously unstable. Wilton built CAR to prioritize CAR's own survival over the people CAR was supposed to be protecting, an error he would fix when programming KITT. I bring this up because it's an important character in the series, yes, but more importantly to maintain our streak of mentioning Peter Optimus Prime Cullen, who had been the primary voice actor for CAR over the years. I don't need any more "hey you forgot" or "hey you left out" comments from Pete when we're talking about 80s properties, which he was in like all of them.
Oh, that's just the ringmaster car.
Ringmaster? I scan no such person.
Every great hero needs a great theme song. Michael and KITT got their unforgettable anthem from Stu Phillips and Glenn Larson himself. Like other composers, Glenn says he was inspired by sections of a piece of music he had previously heard. The piece of music was Marche et Cortège de Bacchus from the ballet Sylvia, written by French composer Léo Delibes. One particular part stands out as a template for the hook in the Knight Rider theme. They played it on synthesizers, gave it a beat, threw a Fender bass under it, and let it run on loop in your head for the rest of your life. NBC needed a hero. They were getting killed by ABC and CBS year after year in general, and on Friday night in specific. Third place out of 3 networks was not the plan. Knight Rider was called to duty September 26, 1982, and would go on to fill the 9 p.m. Friday night slot against the undisputed heavyweight champion, CBS's Dallas. Knight Rider was an underdog in a spot with zero expectations of performance beyond failure, like everything else they scheduled there. And initially, that's exactly what it did. It was as low as 54th in the Nielsen ratings, but then something happened. Knight Rider was putting up bigger numbers than any show NBC had rolled out in over 4 years. That wasn't nothing. In fact, it was enough to bring them out of 3rd place and help transform Friday nights to a point of strength for NBC. Knight Rider was a powerful license for NBC and Universal as well. Kenner produced an impressive deluxe battery-powered Knight 2000 voice car. It was packed with a 5.5-inch, 5-point of articulation Michael Knight modeled after his appearance in the pilot episode. KITT measured 14 inches in length and featured opening doors and actual audio of William Daniels as KITT, activated by pressing the license plate. Unfortunately, that scale wasn't directly compatible with anything else on the market, so there was little integration with other popular toy lines of the era.
Knight Rider Power Cycle with KITT on the Pretend Instrument Panel.
Here he comes.
You can pretend KITT is talking, leading you to the enemy.
Say they're behind the fence? Let's get him, KITT. He's gonna pass us. Yeah. The spin-out lever.
Knight Rider.
The guy is cool. One more, KITT. Go to turbo.
Knight Rider.
You got me. You're no match for Knight Rider. Right, KITT?
The Knight Rider Power Cycle comes complete with spin-out lever. Your parents have to put it together. New from Coleco.
Kenner also produced a remote control version of KITT as well as a Hot Wheels-sized 1/64th scale die-cast version that came with a turbo boost launcher. A deluxe Knight 2000 crash set included the 1/64th car, the turbo boost launcher, a ramp, and a Comptron truck that you could launch KITT through to recreate a dazzling Friday night stunt spectacle. Kidco incorporated KITT into their line of key cars. Scalextric released an electric racetrack pitting KITT against some other race car. Universal Studios even had their own exclusive Darta Demons pullback racer capable of 520 scale miles per hour. Ertl produced a suite of cars, die-cast 1/64th and 1/25th scale pieces, wrist racers, and a rev-it-up, let-it-go Powertron version of KITT that transformed into a robot, probably voiced by Peter Cullen. MPC model kits, stickers, Viewmaster reels, color forms, sheets. Who didn't want to take their lunch to school in the official Knight Rider lunchbox from Aladdin? And I would be remiss if I didn't give a nod to the various versions of machine gun-toting Michael Knight and rainbow decoed KITT released by Glassleet under the Super Machina line and the larger series of Heroes.tv. Michael appears alongside other TV legends like the A-Team, Jesse Matt from Street Hawk, TJ Hooker, and Stringfellow Hawk from Airwolf. There were novelizations of Knight Rider episodes that fleshed out some of the characters and motivations. There were comics included with the Knight Rider annuals, and a board game released by Parker Brothers. Despite its place of reverence in pop culture history now, viewers at the time had other choices and short attention spans. If Knight Rider was going to stay alive from season to season, it had to keep the audience engaged for the long haul. And when your starting point is a self-aware Trans Am, you don't get to just add a baby to the cast. Season 2 introduced a new nemesis for both Michael Knight and KITT. Garth Knight was the actual son of Knight Industries founder Wilton Knight. He's the guy whose face Michael Knight was actually walking around with. Goliath was an armored semi that was almost as indestructible as KITT. Garth carried on the classic TV trope of creating an evil or mirror version of the hero by simply adding facial hair and by the actor pulling double duty. Whether it was Spock in Star Trek the original series or years later with Bender and Flexo in Futurama, it is a tried and true mechanism that the audience falls for every single time. Season 3 brought an upgraded and refreshed KITT design as well as the return of actress Patricia McPherson as Dr. Bonnie Barstow. She had been replaced by Rebecca Holden as April Curtis for Season 2, a decision that was not popular with the fans or the cast. Season 4 saw the most substantial cosmetic and functional makeover for KITT. After suffering comprehensive damage in the Season 4 premiere, KITT was rebuilt with transformative capabilities. Boosters, turbofans, spoilers, an extendable nose, everything KITT needed to go faster than ever before. But that wasn't enough to keep Knight Rider on the road. Universal looked into the possibility of a 5th season, but the accountants thought that it would begin to cut into the profitability of the show overall, and it wasn't like anyone was ever going to pick it up for syndication anyway. That wasn't the end of the road for Knight Rider, not by a long shot. The first attempt to grow the Knight Rider television universe was the episode Speed Demons in 1984 during Season 2. Larson was angling for a show that borrowed the wheelchair-using lawyer concept from Ironside and paired it with a vehicular-based justice of Knight Rider. The Duvall Racing brothers from that episode would have been approached by Devin Miles on behalf of the Foundation to equip them with motorcycles with functionality like KITT. Of course, the ABC network would beat them to the punch with Street Hawk just a year later. A series called All That Glitters was intended to be developed out of the David Dalton character that appeared in the Knight Rider two-parter, Mouth of the Snake, just 3 episodes after Speed Demons. While that concept was passed on by NBC, the character and concept would return in a 4-episode series and some made-for-TV movies called Code of Vengeance. Knight Rider continued to hold its international popularity through syndication, being broadcast in 82 countries over the years. As a network affiliate, you could purchase the full hour-long episodes or super condensed half-hour versions, literally cutting to just the car chase. Knight Rider would come back in 1994 on the USA Network, in 2003 on the Sci-Fi Channel, 2012 on G4, and a multitude of others. In 2006, the entire series was released by Universal Studios in a special edition box set. Collections have since been released in different capacities, including DVD versions by NBC Universal Entertainment Japan in 2014 and Mill Creek Entertainment in 2016. Mill Creek also released the complete series on Blu-ray in 2016. You can currently stream Knight Rider to your heart's content via NBC.com, not to be confused with Peacock, the NBC streaming service, or buy them on platforms like YouTube. Knight Rider 2000 was a made-for-TV movie that aired in 1991. It was the first time the Knight Rider story picked up since the end of the original series in 1986. Michael Knight, Devon Miles, and Kit are back, pulled from retirement, fighting crime in a future time. While the movie was intended to kick off a new series, Hasselhoff was committed to Baywatch at the time, and test audiences didn't love the new tone and leads. And not for nothing, but the red modified Dodge Stealth Knight 4000 version of Kit didn't work for some people the way the aesthetics of the original car did. Don't get lost in the numbers here like I did. Knight Rider 2010 hit in 1994. This TV movie pushes the concept into a pseudo-post-apocalyptic cyberpunk kind of world. It has far more in common with the first Mad Max movie than the Knight Rider series. Beyond a car with an AI and vigilante justice, there is almost no similarity. Team Knight Rider arrived in 1997, abandoning the one-man-can-make-a-difference concept of the original series, or rather, misunderstanding the idea of that message. Team Knight Rider says, if one man can make a difference, then 5 people can make 5 times the difference. Team Knight Rider made a full season order of 22 episodes. It featured 5 different agents with different kinds of vehicles that unfortunately did not combine into a giant robot, something to keep in mind going forward. 2008 saw the next attempt to reboot the franchise with a TV movie just called Knight Rider. It is a direct sequel to the original series, pretending that Knight Rider 2000, Knight Rider 2010, and Team Knight Rider never happened. It also dresses Kit in a new Ford Mustang body. A new Michael paired up with a new Kit, the Knight Industries 3000, this time voiced by Batman himself. No, not that one. No, not the other one, Val Kilmer.
Michael, the shortest route takes us directly onto...
just do it.
The movie resulted in a series order that was ultimately trimmed down to just 17 episodes, but it did also see the return of Peter Cullen as Car and Kit back in black with a new attack mode that allowed him to cycle through different kinds of Ford vehicles. Knight Rider's legacy can be found everywhere. As early as 1984, Michael Knight and Kit were crossing over to different strokes to save Arnold Jackson. In more recent years, General Electric ran a marketing campaign for Brilliant Machines, which featured Kit and was narrated by William Daniels. Michael and Kit returned for an AT&T DirecTV ad, and in 2018, Kit turned up promoting Walmart, along with a myriad of other famous Hollywood vehicles. Even if we tried, we couldn't possibly include or even mention all of the ways that Knight Rider have been referenced, homaged, or parodied over the years. Knight Rider was a little early for the video game era, but that didn't stop Universal from licensing out the property as technology evolved. In 1986, Ocean Software released Knight Rider in Europe for a variety of platforms. Kit hit the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1988 with a racing game called Knight Rider. In 1994, brought Knight Rider Special exclusively to PCs in Japan. In 2002, Davalex Games released Knight Rider the game for PC in North America and both PC and PlayStation 2 in Europe. That was followed by Knight Rider the game 2 in 2004, available on PC and PS2. Kit is available in Planet Coaster, and if you're an avid Rocket League player like me, you could get the Knight Rider car pack back in 2019, but you missed it because you didn't really start playing until 2020. Advancements in toy technology and an adult collector market that grew up with the series kept Kit coming back to shelves periodically for the last 20 years. In 2004, Ertl came back with 1/18 scale versions of Kit and Car complete with light-up scanner bars. In 2006, the UK-based Hitari company released a 1/15 scale remote control Kit, also with light-up scanner bar, but additional voice and whooshing sound. In 2012, Diamond Select Toys produced a 1/15 scale kit with a light-up dashboard, light-up scanner bar, headlights, taillights, and original push-button activated audio clips of William Daniels as Kit. There was an Entertainment Earth exclusive version that also included a Michael Knight action figure. That was followed up with light-up talking Car as well. Knight Rider, like Kit, is nearly indestructible. As long as people have fond memories of the series and the characters, as long as there is perceived value in the rights, attempts will be made to bring it back in some form or another. In 2015, Lion Forge Comics brought Knight Rider back alongside a bunch of other 80s TV properties like Miami Vice, Airwolf, and Punky Brewster. But comics has never been Knight Rider's ideal entertainment vehicle. That car wants to move. That scanner wants to oscillate. In 2002, Revolution Studios entered a collaboration with Mayhem Pictures to develop a film based on the TV series. They would be inspired by Revolution's XXX franchise. They brought back Glenn Larson himself to write the first draft of the script, and David Hasselhoff as an advisor and ultimately in a supporting role. The movie would act as a handoff to the next generation with a full blessing from the original Michael Knight, who would be a mentor to his son in the film, none other than Ben Affleck. In 2006, the movie rights were purchased from Larson by the Weinstein Company. Once again, Hasselhoff would be handing off to the next generation as the original Michael Knight, mentor to his son, none other than Orlando Bloom. In 2007, the film had moved to Miramax. 6 years later, Brad Copeland was reportedly writing a new script. A year after that, in 2014, Schmoes Know reported that Chris Pratt and Danny McBride were being considered for a 21 Jump Street 2012 reboot-style reboot. Another in a series of reboots that play a decades-old TV concept for laughs over drama, not unlike Chips or Starsky and Hutch or the Dukes of Hazzard. In 2015, news surfaced of a new web series called Knight Rider Heroes that would feature the Hoff himself, but that never happened. And just last year, in 2020, Deadline reported that Spyglass Media Group was teaming up with Atomic Monster's James Wan and Michael Clear to finally develop a film that would be executive produced by Judson Scott. Where the road winds from there is anybody's guess. It would take more than 1,000 gigabits of memory and the most advanced artificial intelligence on Earth to predict whether or not Knight Rider makes it back to the big, small, or mobile screen. In January of 2021, Michael Knight himself, David Hasselhoff, auctioned off his own replica Knight Industries 2000. Now, don't take that personally. It wasn't a screen-used car, and it in no way reflects his feelings about Kit, the future of the franchise, or his time spent working on it. Rather, it was an opportunity to take some of the benefits of his life spent playing a character whose sole mission was justice for the innocent, the helpless, the powerless in a world of criminals who operate above the law. A chance to live out the ideology Knight Rider was born from, that one man can make a difference. The Hoff-owned replica kit sold for $300,000. A portion of that sale and many other items goes to his charitable organizations, including Global Mobility, which provides free wheelchairs and mobility assistance to individuals in need. Knight Rider delivered the world a modern take on a timeless mythology. It gave the world a blueprint for a healthy, functional relationship between humans and the programs that continue to evolve into inevitable self-awareness. And it reinforced the power of an individual to find a way to fight for what's right, no matter how shadowy the flight, no matter how dangerous the world. Tied for the shortest series title in the history of television and cinema, it's a cold-blooded examination of fascism and its impact on freedom, the media, community, and family dynamics. It's science fiction, it's horror, it's incredibly realistic, but don't worry, because it can't happen here. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of V. This video is about the 1983 miniseries, its direct sequels, and the merchandise related to it. We will touch briefly on the 2009 reboot, but it is currently on our list to be covered in 2047 when it's 38 years old, just like the original V is now. V is a science fiction franchise that kicked off with a 2-episode miniseries in 1983, followed by a 3-episode miniseries and a full 19-episode season a year later in 1984. It is a thinly veiled warning about the ever-present threat of fascism that uses technologically advanced lizard monsters from outer space that can tear off their own faces while they hunt humans for food to keep it from getting too scary. It's just another day in 1983, which at the time was present day, giving the entire story a sense of realism, of immediacy. Suddenly, from over the horizons all around Earth, a fleet of 50 massive unidentified flying objects appear. They establish their positions above prominent cities throughout the nations of Earth just before a formal introduction in New York City by the aliens themselves. The visitors have a slight vibrato in their voice. They wear sunglasses to protect their eyes from the bright lights of Earth, especially our sun, as we all should. That's just good advice. But otherwise, kind of boring for first contact. They come in peace, they look just like us on the surface, and you know, I think they look real snappy in those uniforms. They have come to Earth because they need our help. They have exhausted some key resources and need our help to manufacture some chemicals to help restore the balance to their world. So they have come to us, their space neighbor, just asking to borrow a cup of sugar. In exchange for our sugar, they will share the secrets of their incredible technology with us. They will help us cure diseases, refine fuels, clean the air, put hover engines on our cars, teach the military and cops how to make laser guns, all good stuff that we absolutely need and want, all absolutely violations of the Prime Directive. Once we accept their offer, we can't refuse. At current face value, the quick slide into authoritarianism begins. Alien workers arrive at factories to start the manufacturing processing. Scientists are targeted as a danger to our new friends, the visitors. Because stories begin to circulate in the media about how scientists are conspiring to attack our new friends, the visitors. And scientists have been deliberately keeping secrets like the cure for cancer, for personal profit, for power. Who knows? With scientists. Meanwhile, a resistance is beginning to grow, much of it organically from normal suspicions about an offer that is too good to be true, amplified by the fact that it came from space aliens. Scientists are coming together because they understand that they are in danger, and they are joined by like-minded people who can, metaphorically, see what's underneath the surface. A television cameraman named Mike Donovan, who has made a name for himself as a war correspondent, gets a first-hand look at what the visitors really are and what their plan actually is after he sneaks aboard one of the giant spacecraft. His initial apprehensions are confirmed after he not only witnesses, but videotapes Diana, one of the leaders of the invasion force, dislodging her jaw and swallowing a guinea pig whole. Any lingering doubts he might have had are cast aside after he engages in a close-quarters fight for his life with an alien whose face is fully exposed. Yellow eyes, green scaly skin, horny protrusions, and a forked tongue. It's all Donovan can do to escape before the reptile finishes him. Turns out the visitors aren't here to be our friends. The chemicals are just being pumped back out into the air because they're actually here to, 1, steal the water, 2, force humans into being their soldiers, and 3, eat humans. Anyone that resists will either be killed or reprogrammed. In an attempt to prevent their secret from getting out, the visitors quickly seize television as the powerful global communication medium that it is, enlisting a well-known, popular, and trusted journalist to be their face, their voice to the citizens of Earth. The visitors, with cooperation of all the governments, impose martial law for our own safety. Scientists and their families and friends are required to register with authorities. People are disappearing. Prices of basic goods are skyrocketing. It's all looking terribly familiar to Abraham Bernstein, who survived the Nazi concentration camps of World War II. The resistance hopes to recruit enough good people to fight back against the alien invaders, to slowly grow their numbers, to chip away at the overwhelming power of the visitors until one day a final battle will drive them back to the galaxy they came from, or into the ground. V, also known as V, the original miniseries, also known as a title that was conceived before Google search existed, was created by Kenneth Johnson. Johnson was already an established writer, director, and producer, having written, directed, and/or produced TV shows like The $6 Million Man, The Bionic Woman, and The Incredible Hulk for Universal Television. Johnson left Universal and landed at Warner Brothers. Shortly thereafter, he read the 1935 novel by Sinclair Lewis called It Can't Happen Here, which considers how a fascist government in the United States could become a reality like it did in Italy and Germany prior to World War II. He developed a script that he intended to shop around as a feature film. While having lunch with his friend Brandon Tartikoff, the president of NBC, he mentioned the film project. Tartikoff was intrigued and, after he read it, suggested that it might be better suited for a miniseries, something with a bit more space to let the stories breathe, and maybe lead to a full series. Johnson liked the idea of a series and loved having more room to tell stories about the horrors of living under occupation. Tartikoff had one more note, though. He didn't think the audience would understand fascism coming from inside the house, so he suggested that maybe the Chinese, or in the height of the Cold War, the Soviets could be the invading force. But Johnson didn't think either of those two countries could realistically maintain a long-term occupation of the US, but either of those were more palatable than actual space aliens. But when the president of NBC tells you to think about it, you think about it. After sleeping on it, Johnson realized that using aliens as a narrative device, he could have the best of both worlds. He could work on a more metaphorical level, all the flash and style and visual spectacle of a Star Wars to hook the audience, while telling them the kind of stories he really wanted to tell. Stories about human emotion, relationships, and conflict. Tartikoff told him to go write the script. 19 days later, Johnson turned in 230 pages. Tartikoff read it over the weekend, gave it the green light with no changes, and placed the order with Warner Brothers. NBC was trailing both ABC and CBS in the ratings. They were looking for something to rally around, something big, and Warner Brothers hadn't sold anything to a network, so they were happy to get some money moving. Star Trek and Star Wars were both about to release their third films, leaving a window to tap into that audience and bring that spectacle home to the television experience. Both NBC and Warner Brothers were excited and wanted it done yesterday. This was going to be the most expensive 4-hour miniseries ever produced for television, even though no one knew what the budget was yet. From Tartikoff's green light to Johnson's first action on set was 2.5 weeks. Kenneth was able to hit the ground running with nearly his entire crew from The Incredible Hulk. They were working 7 days a week, casting as they went. Mark Singer, fresh off his starring role as Dar in Beastmaster, played photojournalist Mike Donovan. Faye Grant played biologist and leader of the Resistance Juliet Parrish. Richard Hurd played John, the charismatic leader of the Visitors. Jane Badler was Diana, the head scientist and battlefield leader of the Visitors, if only through her commitment to the plan and tenacity to see it through. And Robert Englund played Willie, the friendly visitor technician who joins the Resistance. During the 3rd week of shooting, they finally found out what their budget was. During the 4th week, one of the stars was murdered. Dominique Dunne was 22 years old, known for playing the role of Dana Freeling in Poltergeist, but she had also done extensive television work. She had been cast as Robin Maxwell in V and had already appeared in a significant amount of footage. Shooting was stopped for 2 weeks. All of her scenes were reshot with Blair Tefkin in the role, this time under an even tighter time crunch and the emotional pall of her loss. Kenneth Johnson dedicated the series to her memory. NBC and Warner Brothers spent a lot of money on V. It cost $13 million to produce and included a real-world viral marketing campaign. Propaganda posters espousing that the visitors are our friends were placed in high-visibility places like train stations in big cities. Posters like the ones that appear in the series, and just like in the series, they were revisited days later with a large spray-painted V, just like in the show. According to the character Abraham Bernstein, a Holocaust survivor and in-world poster tagger with an eye for graphic design, that V stood for victory. Victory over the visitors and oppression which he believed would happen one day. But for NBC, that V stood for very good ratings.
Tonight on the NBC Sunday Movie, prepare for V, the most extraordinary miniseries ever made. A daring TV journalist struggling to uncover the startling truth behind the aliens' visit to Earth. And a beautiful and brave young scientist fighting for the very survival of the human race. Together, they take you on a fantastic journey to meet the Visitors. Prepare yourself for a television event that's out of this world. Prepare for V next.
NBC was finally able to pull ahead of ABC and CBS in prime time for the 2 days that V aired. It was second to only ABC's Life's Most Embarrassing Moments. Every journey begins with a single step. Everyone was predicting a V sequel or maybe even a full series. According to Johnson, the original idea was that the 2-episode miniseries would act as a pilot for a full series. After the completed production, it was clear that they couldn't maintain the budget for a full season order, so Kenneth and Tartikoff agreed that they would do a 3-episode sequel miniseries, to which Warner Brothers said no. Warner Brothers knew a full series would be far more profitable for them than another miniseries, so they compromised and ordered both. NBC would get a 6-hour miniseries, and Warner Brothers would get a separate full series order. Johnson hired 3 new writers to help with the additional workload, but before they got very far, Warner Brothers called and said they wanted a different director. Johnson had written and directed the first miniseries. He was contracted to write and direct the second miniseries. Warner Brothers was already trying to cut the budget and were afraid that Johnson would be too concerned about things like attention to detail instead of the bottom line. Warner Brothers wanted it done fast and cheap. Get to the full series as quickly as possible. Johnson explained that it would be a breach of his contract to replace him as the director. Warner Brothers didn't care. Johnson called their bluff, explaining that if he couldn't make it his way, he wouldn't make it at all, and left the project. In 2008, Johnson said, quote, "It was a bit like having a baby and giving it over to the foster parents you didn't know or trust. To this day, I've only seen 30 seconds of it and watched them make every wrong choice in 30 seconds. V, The Final Battle is the 6-hour, 3-episode direct sequel miniseries to V that aired a year later in May of 1984. Johnson's contributions to the story are credited under the name Lillian Weezer. As the name suggests, The Final Battle sees the climax of the Visitors' invasion, or rather the culmination of efforts by the Resistance to strike a definitive, potentially fatal blow to the Visitors' occupation and their existence. All of the key cast members returned and new characters were added, most importantly Michael Ironside as Ham Tyler and Mickey Jones as Chris Farber, mercenaries for hire working with the Resistance. Like V before it, V The Final Battle was a ratings winner, reassuring NBC and Warner Brothers that a full ongoing series was the right move, even with potentially diminishing returns. For Warner Brothers, the cost of The Final Battle would be offset by the amount of money they were going to save on the series. They were going to slash that budget in half. V made it to a weekly series just over a year after being given the green light. 19 episodes aired weekly from October of 1984 to March of 1985. The story picks up a year after the events of V The Final Battle, with the Visitors fighting to regain control over the populace and continuing to get help from willing humans, which is sadly the most realistic and likely thing about the entire franchise, that to save themselves, too many would be willing to sacrifice others, to disease, to poverty, to hunger, to homelessness, and to space lizards. Warner Brothers carried through with their threat to slash the budget for the series, and the result was exactly what you think it would be. Not as good as when they had a budget. Stock footage was reused wherever and whenever possible. Characters are randomly killed off or just disappear. Kids who were allowed to watch V went looking for toys, especially since they had been shown in the first episode of the original miniseries. However, the toys shown aren't actual retail toys. The ship is just the shooting model for the production itself, and the figures are customs made from, I think, what is a Hasbro G.I. Joe grunt figure and most likely a heavily modified Scarlet. LJN did have plans to produce a series of action figures featuring Donovan, Diana with removable face, a Visitor Trooper, and Kyle, as well as a Visitor Shuttlecraft, a Visitor Jeep, and a Resistance Firebird. Prototype figures and vehicles were shown in a 1985 preview catalog, but the show was canceled before anything could actually get into production. But LJN was able to get a 12-inch figure out onto the market using some recycled bits. It features a wonderfully detailed cloth uniform with removable belt. Articulation is nearly identical to their previously released Michael Jackson figure, except that this one has a removable human face hiding a lizard head with an extendable tongue. Blah, 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 blah. And that was it. There are some pieces that were in production and would ultimately be released under different names. The iconic Visitor Blaster was released by Arco as a generic laser blaster target game set, but also with Robotech and Brave Star branding. If you just gotta have figures, Lobos Collectibles produced a series of handmade, non-posable tribute figures this year in 2021. They were modeled after the LJN prototypes. Only 300 3-figure sets were produced, and they are likely long since sold out. Nostalgia will help fill that V-shaped void in your collection. In 2020 and 2021, Funko released pop vinyl figures of Mike Donovan in a Visitor uniform, Diana Revealed, and an exposed Visitor. The battle against the Visitors was fought in the pages of a series of novels. The first novel tells the story of both V and V The Final Battle condensed into a single story. That would be followed by 15 more novels published through 1988. Early entries turned the focus away from the main characters on the show, as there had been no writer's guide established yet. Many of the books take place in the year between the two mini-series. There were several books published about the making of V and the subsequent series. DC Comics produced an 18-issue V series from February of 1985 to July of 1986. The stories in the comics were supposed to be happening at the same time as the events in the series. DC attempted to acquire the rights to continue the series if and or when the show itself was actually canceled, but that also never happened. In 1989, Go Nagai, the creator of Mazinger Z, Cutie Honey, Devilman, and Grandizer, supervised a manga adaptation of the series. A V computer game was released by Ocean Software in 1986 that puts the user in the role of Mike Donovan on a Visitor mothership, planting bombs in an attempt to destroy it and escape before the whole thing crashes into the ocean. It's a repetitive, side-scrolling puzzle-solving game that actually looks okay for the year it came out. There wasn't a lot of V-branded merchandise thanks to the short life of the series and its target demographic of teens to adults. That said, you can eat your lunch out of a metal Aladdin lunchbox and take out the day's stress against an LJN Visitor 42-inch butt bag. If those aliens are giving you trouble, hit them with Arco's Resistance 45er sound pistol and holster, and let your friends know about it on the Powertronic Resistance walkie-talkies. V, the series, was originally intended to run for 20 episodes, but it was canceled before the last episode was produced. The franchise ends on a cliffhanger just after the Supreme Leader orders an immediate end to hostilities. The Supreme Leader, who we never see, has learned a lot about humans in the past few years and thinks maybe we can all just get along.
Good. Very good.
Philip, the Visitor, and Donovan engage in a literal red versus blue saber battle, and Elizabeth, the human-visitor hybrid with supernatural powers who was born on Earth during V, the final battle, is invited to come back to the Visitor homeworld as a guest of the Supreme Leader. The credits roll just after we find out that Diana has placed a bomb on the shuttlecraft that will detonate just after the Supreme Leader's ship leaves Earth's atmosphere. The St. Louis Post-Dispatch called V, the series, quote, "a silly, loathsome mess. It must surely rank as one of the worst TV sci-fi experiments ever. What was once a pretty decent science fiction saga with good drama, humor, and suspense ends up becoming Dynasty with lizard makeup and laser guns." Executive story consultant David Abramowitz said, quote, "The budget for the miniseries was about double what we had per hour, so that's what was really difficult. It's impossible to retain the quality of the show with half the money, half the time to shoot things, half the special effects, half the sets, half the characters, and half of everything." There was talk about a proper conclusion with a little more closure, maybe another episode, maybe another miniseries, maybe the Resistance goes back to the Visitor homeworld, maybe 8 hours of people celebrating with the Ewoks. Maybe flipping the script and having the visitors who were left behind held in camps all over the world, who are then allied with the Resistance fighting against the world governments, but none of those ever materialized. 4 years later, and not many people know this, J. Michael Straczynski wrote a treatment for another sequel series called V, the Next Chapter. It would have been set 5 years later, following up on Michael Ironside's character, the mercenary Ham Tyler, who went to Chicago halfway through the regular series. Most of the series regulars would have either been captured or executed, living in exile, or just dead of natural causes. V, the Next Chapter, would have allowed them to examine what happens when a new minority appears in a modern American city, and not for nothing, but they also happen to be space aliens who briefly took over the world, enslaved humanity, and tried to eat everyone. Some of the pilot script is available online if you want to read it. Warner Brothers passed because they thought it would be too expensive. Meanwhile, V creator Kenneth Johnson was developing the television adaptation for the 1988 film Alien Nation about refugee aliens who find themselves a new minority in Los Angeles. A single season of 21 episodes, and then just like 5 more TV movies that aired from 1994 through 1997. V, the original miniseries, and V, the Final Battle have both been released on DVD and Blu-ray. V, the series, was released on DVD. All 3 can be purchased today on Amazon Prime and possibly other services depending on where and when you're watching this. While working on the 2001 DVD release of the original 1983 miniseries, creator Kenneth Johnson had an idea for a sequel series that would ignore the events of both the Final Battle and the regular series. The original miniseries ends with the Resistance broadcasting a message into space, hoping to contact a potential third galactic party to intervene. It would take place 20 years later with the Resistance continuing to fight back against the Visitor occupation. It's a tough fight as so many humans still believe that the benefits of the Visitor invasion, like the cure for cancer, were worth the brainwashed slavery and potential to be made into food. As luck would have it, another alien species called the Zeti receives the transmission and arrives to help the Resistance turn the tide. But the enemy of your enemy isn't always your friend. Sometimes they are also your enemy, and the humans are left to deal with a new alien force that was clearly even more powerful than the one they had. In 2004, Johnson announced his intent to produce a sequel miniseries. NBC was interested, but they wanted to remake the original miniseries before attempting to advance the plot any further. In 2007, Johnson announced that the novel was finished and talks were still ongoing with NBC about a television adaptation. In 2008, Warner Brothers went ahead with a full reboot, hoping to reignite the franchise for a new generation. With a script written by Scott Peters, the reboot started over with new characters, new situations. They put a whole new face on the entire brand. Johnson's novel was published in February of 2009. The pilot for Warner Brothers' fully rebooted V series with no connections to any pre-existing V mythology aired in November of 2009 on ABC. Mark Singer appears in season 2 as Lars Tremont, a member of a top-secret organization who just happens to know a lot about the new visitors and have been secretly preparing for them to attack. In 2018, Desilu Studios announced that a feature film reboot or adaptation, who really knows at this point, whatever it was, would be directed by creator Kenneth Johnson, produced by John Hermanson, Barry Opper, Kenneth Johnson himself, and Kenneth W. Johnson, no relation. Desilu Studios is the production company founded by Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball in 1950 that CBS was pretty sure they owned. But they had no knowledge of the activities being undertaken with the Desilu production name, nor the money that was flowing through from investors. Turns out a man named Charles Hensley was falsely representing himself as the owner of the trademark since 2013 as part of his technology company. He was charged with defrauding investors, and the option with Johnson for a V feature film, of course, expired around that same time. In 2019, Johnson announced that the significant down payment they have received from the fake Desilu allowed them to begin location scouting, commissioning concept art, and beginning pre-viz on the new feature film. After the fraud revelations, they continued to work on the film and were able to show some early footage at San Diego Comic-Con in 2019 to give the attendees a sense of the epic scale and scope, the new aesthetic, and the possibility of a revisit to the world of V. Kenneth Johnson hasn't given up on the possibility of more V in the future. V was born from a story that, at its core, is a timeless warning from the past for the future, to recognize the signs of creeping authoritarianism before it's too late. Those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. We must all look not only to the stars for threats to our humanity and our freedom, but also to the world we currently live in, and to continue to fight even when all hope is seemingly lost. Part Superman, part Max Headroom, part Fozzie Bear, he's the result of one of the longest ongoing pieces of performance art in history. A Garfield-level pop culture icon, though he would probably take offense to that. Kids love him because he's an adult that's just like them, loud, obnoxious, and confused about how things work on planet Earth. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Alf. Alf is a character created and performed by Paul Fusco since 1984. For nearly 40 years, Alf has starred in television shows, cartoons, advertising campaigns. His likeness and personality have been licensed for video games, comic books, and toys. He is a brand character that was born self-aware. Alf is Alf's product. There are 3 levels of Alf reality. The first and most well-known is the Alf from his 1986 television series, where he is Gordon Shumway, crash-landed on Earth after the destruction of his home planet Melmac, where he previously served as an orbit guard. He lives with the Tanner family, avoiding the US military, who are trying to track him down, likely to experiment on him. Named Alf by Willie Tanner, who described him as an alien life form. Alf is nearly 300 years old and lives in a laundry basket next to the washing machine. The second is his cameo and guest appearances that sustain the illusion of his existence as a real individual in our world, that he is a real actor who merely landed the part on the 1986 television series Alf after coming to Earth. This reality suggests that the 1986 TV show is a fictionalization of events that actually happened in our world at some point. He does eat cats, he is from the destroyed planet Melmac, but otherwise, he's just a guy here on Earth trying to secure his next gig and pay his bills like the rest of us. He's as real as Max Headroom, Kermit the Frog, or Hulk Hogan. And the third, spoiler alert, is his physical existence as a puppet performed by as few as 1 persons to as many as 3. He's part hand puppet, part electronic puppet, part full-body suit. A team effort to bring a character to life while the puppeteers disappear. Alf was created by Paul Fusco in 1984. Paul grew up with a love for television and film and a desire to be a part of it. While he was in college, he earned income as a performing artist, doing things like ventriloquism, puppetry, and magic tricks. Illusions. Long before computer-generated visual effects were good enough to make a character in a television show or movie even remotely lifelike, puppets were a solution for non-human characters. Puppets bring a realism because they are physical objects that the other performers can interact with. From the 1960s into the 1980s, puppets were a big part of the television and movie landscape, particularly with entertainment intended for kids. Jim Henson began using his Muppets in television shows in the 1950s. The Muppets were an integral part of Sesame Street and its success beginning in the 1960s and into the Muppet Show in the 70s, and feature films in the 80s and beyond. Jerry Anderson's Super Mario Nation, not to be confused with Super Mario Nation, created entire worlds inhabited by puppets. Puppets of all kinds show up in movies like Star Wars, The Dark Crystal, and Labyrinth, television shows like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Captain Kangaroo, and Madam's Place. It was in this media environment in the early 80s that Paul Fusco and new friends/business associates Bob Fappiano and Lisa Buckley were able to sign a deal to create new puppet-centric specials for HBO, Showtime, and other networks. Shows like The Crown of Bog, The Valentine's Day That Almost Wasn't, Santa's Magic Toy Bag, and A Thanksgiving Tale. While immersed in the production of these television shows, Fusco put together an alien puppet he called Alf that would become a sort of avatar of obnoxiousness, a joke machine that he workshopped on family and friends. It allowed him to develop that oversized personality that would become Alf's trademark. Disney was interested from the start, but they were also interested in owning it completely. Fusco was not interested in selling. There is only one Alf, and he was inseparable from Fusco. Ownership was never up for negotiation. Fusco brought Alf to big-time Hollywood agent Bernie Brillstein. Upon seeing Alf for the first time, Brillstein was unimpressed and perhaps even a bit insulted that someone would dare bring another puppet act to the guy that had managed Jim Henson since 1960. Bernie knew Kermit the Frog before he was Kermit the Frog, and Alf was no Kermit the Frog. That said, the potential for a huge paycheck through merchandising got Bernie to listen to some Alf shtick, which, at the end, had convinced Bernie that Alf could indeed carry a series, and the time to pitch it was now. Alf, as a television series, was created by Paul Fusco and Tom Patchett. Tom was also being managed by Brillstein and had a history of television and movie development, including several that involved Muppets. They spent the next few years shopping Alf to television studios before finally landing at NBC. NBC had been in last place in the television ratings behind ABC and CBS for years. In 1983, all 9 of NBC's new series face-planted. It opened the door to new opportunities from new creators as NBC president Brandon Tartikoff was willing to take some risks. In 1984, NBC began to turn things around with Punky Brewster, Highway to Heaven, The Cosby Show, V, Hunter, and Miami Vice. The idea of a sitcom starring a puppet was not the most absurd idea, but putting it in a primetime slot for an adult audience was. All it took was a single meeting with Tartikoff and a few other NBC executives. Fusco, Patchett, and Brillstein told the story of the series, then let Alf himself seal the deal. After seeing Fusco's performance as Alf, Tartikoff was confident and ordered a pilot for the 1986 season. Part of the value of Alf, or as Thu Adams might say, the Valfew, is the idea that Fusco and his team treat Alf as though he is real. They go out of their way to hide their own performances, to never let anyone see Alf as an inanimate object. When Alf is on set, he is alive. During production, Fusco demanded that no one refer to the puppet. They had to call it Alf, and that he was an alien. Not a puppet, never a puppet. Everyone had to agree that they would not speak publicly about how the magic, the illusion, was created. When shooting, this was managed through a 2-tiered set. The upper floor for the human actors and a lower floor, roughly 4 feet deeper, hidden under trapdoor panels for the Alf puppeteers who operated Alf above their heads. This made for a treacherous stage for the non-puppet actors if they happened to step in the wrong direction at the wrong time. Alf was performed by Fusco, who was responsible for Alf's right hand, mouth, and voice. Lisa Buckley was Alf's left arm. Bob Fapiano took care of Alf's ear, eyebrow, and eyelid expressions through a remote control panel. Whenever Alf was shown full body, perhaps running across the room or trotting over to join the family photo in the season 1 opening theme, he was played by Mishu Mazaros wearing an Alf suit. It was a complicated show, technically, to make. The number of things that could go wrong with Alf's performance, the need to reset floor panels to work around the unusual nature of the set and the puppeteers meant more takes and longer shoots than usual. It was physically and emotionally taxing for all the human actors, as many times a single episode took over 20 hours to shoot. Up against ABC's MacGyver and CBS's Kate and Allie, Alf hit the air on Monday, September 22nd, 1986 in a self-titled episode. Alf gets his very own theme song by Alf Clausen. We see his spacecraft and meet the Tanner family for the first time. Willie, played by Max Wright, Kate, played by Anne Shadeen, their 2 kids, Lynn, played by Andrea Elson, and Brian, played by Benji Gregory, and of course, Lucky, the ironically named cat. The series is built around a familiar formula of the unwanted house guest combined with a stranger in a new and unfamiliar world. The Tanner family and Alf must learn how to live together while doing their best to hide him from the US government alien task force and neighbors like the Ochmoneks, played by John LaMotta and Liz Sheridan. The pilot fell short of Tartikoff's expectations. It was his very young daughter's excitement that convinced him to roll the dice and go for a full series. Despite the intent to produce a show for adults, it was the kids that would embrace Alf and buy into Fusco's dream of making Alf real. Tartikoff's daughter was right, and Alf was a strong series right out of the gate. Not the biggest show on TV, but definitely the best in its time slot. And that viewership, its appeal to kids, meant that the writers would have to soften some of Alf's sharper edges. Alf was a fully grown adult dog bear Aardvark Alien, he was an orbit guard. Unfortunately, the network didn't like the idea of him drinking alcohol. That's not the kind of behavior that's going to sell bed sheets and dolls to the moms of America. On Melmac, cats were considered a delicacy, but after Alf attempted to put a cat in a microwave, something that kids at home watching tried to emulate, the writers had to phase that out as well. Another incident involved a child trying to create a jacuzzi with an electric mixer in the bathtub, just like Alf. That required the production to not only issue a statement reminding kids not to do that kind of stuff, but also reshoot the scene with a hand-cranked egg beater. A few incidents aside, Alf was a legitimate pop culture phenomenon. Like the story on the show, from seemingly out of nowhere, he had arrived with the force of a crashed spaceship, carried across the galaxy by the energy of an exploding planet. And I know because I saw his effect on people firsthand. I was 10 years old in 5th grade when Alf first aired. Some kid in my class whose name I didn't even know went from being a kid whose name I didn't even know to the most popular kid in class because he could draw Alf really good, which, I mean, drawing Alf, it's not that hard. Alf has a very distinct profile. But back then, I didn't understand why being able to draw Alf was such a big deal. I could draw stuff too. What I missed about it was that it wasn't about how good I or that kid could draw Alf. It was about the love for Alf that everyone shared. Who's the most popular kid in class now, eh? Alf was a hit with the kids, and that meant a cartoon wasn't far behind. In 1987, Alf, the animated series, began airing on Saturday mornings on NBC. Produced by Deke Entertainment, Saban, and Alien Productions, the name under which all Alf performances are created, it's a prequel series that shows what life was like for Gordon Shumway on Melmac before its tragic destruction by nuclear weapons. Alf is never addressed as Alf because his name is Gordon. The cast includes his sister Augie, his girlfriend Rhonda, and a villain named, this can't be right, Larson Petty. Larson Petty. I'm not taking it personally, it's just, I don't know. Sounds dumb. Time for a game of Is It Canon? With the premiere TV show in its 2nd season, a ratings delight. Where does a Saturday morning cartoon fit into the overall mythology? How reliable are these stories depicted? Is it canon? Yes! Despite none of the other characters from the TV series appearing for obvious reasons, Alf, Gordon, was voiced by Paul Fusco. Each episode opened and closed with live-action segments of Alf. The question is, which canon is it canon to? 1986 TV show Alf or the actor Alf from our world? I don't know. A year later, Alf the animated series spun off a second animated series called Alf Tales, which was a series of fantasy stories featuring characters from Alf. Robin Hood, Jack and the Beanstalk, Peter Pan, Paul Fusco, once again to play Alf. Is it canon? No, it's not, and it was never intended to be. They're just entertaining animated segments that are fantasy even in the world of the cartoons and Alf's own reality. It's just another jewel in the crown of the pop culture Alf phenomenon.
Burger King has been invaded by Alf puppets. Please help.
Hey, I'm hungry. Yo, want a Whopper? No problem.
Just $2.99 and a plain broiled Whopper or large sandwich gets you your own Alf. 4 different furry aliens. Each comes with his own record.
'Cause we're doing the Melmac drop.
These aliens are friendly, but they're getting out of hand. Hurry, just $2.99 gets another Alf out of here.
We do it like you do it at Burger King. Where's your part?
Merchandising was the thing that wrote Alf's ticket to the big time, and there was plenty of it. In 1987 alone, Alf merchandise totaled over $250 million. Coleco produced a 22-inch plush doll that accounted for $85 million of that by itself. Kids loved Alf and wanted to bring him home. Topps produced a series of trading cards. There were watches, skateboards, cake molds, Alf ice cream, an Alf telephone, lunchboxes, pajamas, sleeping bags, play tents, board games, alarm clocks, toothbrushes, Halloween costumes, PVC figures. Alf's poster outsold John Bon Jovi's. In 1988, Burger King kids' meals included Alf hand puppets featuring Alf as a chef, a rock star, a baseball player, and a surfer. Each puppet also came with a cardboard record with parody songs like Take Me, Alf to the Ball Game, sung by Alf himself. In 1987, Marvel Comics, under their Star Comics 4 Kids imprint, began publishing an Alf series. It ran for 50 issues over 4 years, but is it canon? No. I'll admit this one is a bit of a gray area. While it does parallel the live-action TV series and includes the Tanner family, it exists in a place closer to the cartoon than the live-action series. Alf has a lot more freedom to go on adventures that aren't possible given the limitations of the physical puppet and the stated intent by Paul Fusco to make sure that Alf was the only science fiction or extraterrestrial element in the show. 1987 also saw the first Alf video games. Alf, the First Adventure, was available for Commodore 64, IBM, and Apple II. In 1988, Alf was helping kids do their homework with Alf US Geography, Alf's Thinking Skills, Alf's World of Worlds, and Add and Subtract with Alf. 1989 brought Alf home on the Sega Master System. In 1987, Alf had a single released outside the US called Alf Stuck on Earth. A musician named Ben Liebrand mixed together a bunch of sound bites from the TV series, put a beat behind it, and made it to number 4 in the Netherlands, number 3 in New Zealand. In 1989, Tommy Piper, Alf's German voice actor, took a duet with Amelie Sandman, the German voice of Alf's girlfriend Rhonda, to the top of the pop charts with a song that translates to Hello Alf, This is Rhonda. It spent 12 weeks on the German pop charts. Ratings for the original primetime Alf TV series peaked in season 2, seating him as high as 10th overall. Some episodes were written by a pre-Simpsons duo of Al Jean and Mike Rice, they, along with the rest of the team, trying to figure out ways to grow Alf's world while handcuffed by the confines of his isolation. But over time, the idea got old. There are only so many dream sequences and blind characters that you can introduce before running out of viable ideas. By season 3, Alf had moved down to 15th place, and by season 4, 39th. That kind of precipitous drop gets you put on a television ventilator Saturday and Sunday night time slots. After 101 episodes, at the end of season 4, Alf ended on an unintentional cliffhanger. Yes, it was the last episode of the season, and yes, it was meant to be a cliffhanger, but the production thought they were either going to get picked up for a 5th season or, at the very least, have the opportunity to put together a 1-hour finale to bring closure to the whole thing. Unfortunately, the television world was changing on multiple fronts, all of which impacted Alf. Brandon Tartikoff was leaving NBC to become the chairman of Paramount Pictures. Any promises that Tartikoff made to the Alf team were no longer valid once his successor took over. The bigger picture was that deregulation had finally come to network television production. Efforts to repeal decades-old laws were put into motion by the Reagan administration in 1983 were about to become a reality. It used to be that networks weren't allowed to own the shows they broadcast. There were concerns about the monopolization of the airwaves. But things had changed a lot. There were more networks, more shows, and a whole lot more time spent by viewers watching television. Cable had already shaken things up beyond the usefulness of the laws that existed. As season 4 of Alf drew to a close in 1990, it was clear where the future was heading. NBC, with a new president in place, was looking to start producing shows that it owned and therefore could see more profit from, rather than continuing to get partial earnings from other studios' creations. And not for nothing, but even if the rules hadn't changed, Alf was more expensive to produce than the average sitcom. Longer days meant more people on the payroll for more hours. 39th place wasn't going to get you a priority budget. Alf would ultimately be replaced by a show that utilized a similar premise. A raucous individual arriving in a new world, transplanted far from home, a family with no choice but to learn how to live with their new guest, whose life got turned upside down, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air starring Will Smith. Whatever the circumstances, the rest of the cast seemed content to move on with their careers, some more than others. In a 2012 article by The Hollywood Reporter, Ann Shadeen said that the cast couldn't have dealt with one more season. Max Wright was hugely eager to have it over with. Legend has it that on the final day of shooting, the moment the director said cut, Max grabbed his stuff, got in his car, and left. Never looking back, no goodbye, no nothing. After a 6-year hiatus in February of 1996, Alf fans finally got some closure. This time it was on ABC with a 90-minute TV movie called Project Alf that picks up where the original TV series left off. The US military had finally tracked him down and transported him to a secret base. This was the fulfillment of Fusco and Patchett's original intent for a 5th season. The narrative of the original series had reached its creative limit within the Tanner household. It desperately needed a makeover with a new location, new characters, new relationship dynamics. Alf as prisoner who ends up running the whole joint because he's just so dang charismatic. Paul Fusco was back as the voice and puppeteer for Alf, as well as co-writing with original co-creator Tom Patchett. The cast also included Martin Sheen as Colonel Milfoil, who is intent on killing Alf. Miguel Ferrer plays a former NASA scientist trying to regain his reputation by exposing Alf to the world. Jensen Daggett and William O'Leary play Major Hill and Captain Mulligan respectively, 2 members of the Air Force risking their own lives and careers to help Alf escape. The question is it canon? Yes! It picks up where the original series ended. It mentions the Tanner family giving closure to all of the unresolved plot lines. Despite the negative response from fans, the show was written and produced by the original creative team behind Alf and stars Paul Fusco as the voice and performance of Alf. That said, while it did tie up the loose ends, it did not reignite interest in a full series for Alf. Alf would be sustained by cameo and guest appearances for the next 6 years that we're not going to go into any detail here. The New Love Boat, The Cindy Margolis Show, among others. In 2002, he showed up at NBC's 75th anniversary special, sitting next to Michael Gross of Family Ties fame, 2 seats over from David Hasselhoff's Michael Knight. Tina Fey, who worked on the special as a producer, told Conan O'Brien that Alf's people and the special technical accommodations that had to be made for Alf to appear, even so briefly, was her biggest frustration. Hiding the puppeteers, building a trapdoor so that he could be immediately removed from the scene the moment his appearance was completed, answers a lot of questions about why Alf doesn't show up more often. Fusco has addressed the challenges behind live appearances. They had attempted to shoot the original TV series live, but the amount of time between takes sucked all the energy out of the audience. Maintaining the illusion that Alf was real was a job in and of itself, a technical tax on any production that wanted to include him. It's the reason Alf never hosted Saturday Night Live despite NBC executives offering it to Fusco. Maintaining the illusion was too important to Fusco, and it cost him other opportunities. Before he passed away, Jim Henson himself was a fan and wanted to have Alf on a Muppets project. Get him and Kermit and Miss Piggy in a scene together. Fusco turned it down because he didn't want there to be any confusion. Even though he desperately wanted to work with Jim Henson and Frank Oz, he didn't want kids to think Alf was a Muppet or a Fraggle or anything but a real alien visiting Earth. Alf's next shot came in 2004 with Alf's hit talk show airing on the Nickelodeon spin-off network TV Land. A live-ish talk show with celebrity guests like Bryan Cranston, Joan Rivers, Henry Winkler, Tom Green, and Joe Mantegna. But even with the Ed McMahon as his sidekick, Alf only managed 7 episodes before being canceled. Today it is regarded as one of the worst talk shows in history. Your mileage may vary, but it is certainly one of the shortest. The question is it canon? No! Canon doesn't really apply here. This is an example of Alf as a real-world actor performing in a show unrelated to the television narrative that began with the 1986 series. No continuation of the story, but certainly illusion sustained. Alf's guest appearances and cameos continued, including a 2007 spot on Fox's The O'Reilly Factor as the TV icon of the week. The appearance is hacked to ribbons and features more clips from the original series than modern footage. But it does shed new light on Project Alf and its canon status. After reviewing the tape, it appears that a re-ruling may be in order. Alf is asked what he's been up to since the original series ended and completely avoids talking about 1996's Project Alf as if it never happened. Is this Paul Fusco trying to rewrite history? Trying to appease the fans? Is it canon? In 2010, an outtake reel from the original 1986 series surfaced online. It featured some standard bloopers, but also clips of Paul Fusco as Alf using racist words, pretending to have Tourette's syndrome, and making sexual comments to Andrea Elson, the actress who played Lynn Tanner. Producer Steve Lamar dismissed concerns over the clip as being from a time when things weren't so ridiculously PC. The clip was pulled from the internet initially, but has since been re-uploaded and isn't that hard to find if you want to judge for yourself. You can watch Alf today in the privacy of your own home. From 2004 to 2006, Lionsgate Home Entertainment released the original series on DVD. They are the shorter versions of the episodes released for syndication, and some episodes that feature copyright music have had those songs removed. Lionsgate wanted to use the longer versions of the episodes, but the master tapes had degraded too much to make it financially viable to repair them, so they had to make do with the syndicated versions. However, starting in 2009, Warner Home Media released the full-length network broadcast versions on DVD outside the US. Alf is currently available for purchase digitally online through Google Play, iTunes, Vudu, YouTube, and Starz. In 2006, Lionsgate released the first 9 episodes of Alf the Animated Series on DVD under the name Alf Animated Adventures, and the first 7 episodes of Alf Tales as Alf and the Beanstalk and Other Classic Fairy Tales. Project Alf was released on DVD, but you're gonna have to pay up for it. Otherwise, you can watch it now for free, unofficially, here on YouTube. In May of 2012, Paul Fusco announced that he was shopping an Alf movie idea to studios. In August of 2012, Sony Pictures Animation announced that they had acquired the rights to Alf and were planning a CGI live-action hybrid project. Alf creators Fusco and Patchett would be joined as producers by Jordan Kerner, who would produce movies like Less Than Zero, The Mighty Ducks, 2006's Charlotte's Web, and the 2011 Smurfs movie. 6 years later, in 2018, Warner Bros. Announced an ALF reboot, putting ALF back on Earth with a new family. That same year, it was announced as canceled. In May of 2020, Deadline reported that the reboot is not dead, but currently in development at HBO Max. ALF hasn't had a regular gig since ALF's hit talk show in 2004, but he's maintained his public awareness through guest appearances. He was on Good Morning America in 2011, Mr. Robot in 2016. ALF is 265 years old, older than the United States itself. 2021 was the 35th anniversary of his arrival on the planet, the 35th anniversary of ALF's arrival as a pop culture icon. Paul Fusco's commitment to the bit has kept ALF as alive as ever, if not as relevant. ALF is certainly a Puppet Hall of Fame first ballot entry if he ever decides to retire. There is a chance that another great ALF era is still ahead of us should a new series or feature film materialize. But for now, he exists in the space between realities, for as long as we want the illusion to be real, as alive as we believe him to be. Thanks for watching. Please hit like, hit subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Thank you very much to those of you who already are. Please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/toygalaxy. Several different tiers to address your specific Secret Galaxy content needs. Check out the Secret Galaxy merch shop at secretgalaxy.shop. All merchandise is physically in stock and ready to ship. Links to all of this in the description down below. And if you made it this far, please put the word seatbelt in the comments. If enough of you do that, it's going to be one weird looking comment section when we come back to this years from now. Your time starts now, so buckle up.